Oh, hello. When last I was on, apparently I need to, at least I put it on pause and need space. Not at my, oh, there it is. There's a
Let's go. Let's go. Todd.
that really worked.
Did you know that if you mix sweetened condensed you can make an exotic and extremely delicious dessert that will surprise everyone? Start by adding 1 large tablespoon of butter to a skillet over medium heat. Stir until the butter melts completely. Once melted, add 2 tablespoons of Nesquik powder and keep stirring. Let it cook for a little while until the mixture becomes thicker, darker, and more concentrated. Now add 1 can of sweetened condensed milk and continue cooking over medium heat, stirring constantly so it doesn't stick or burn. While you're stirring, write the name of the city you're watching from in the comments and I'll leave you a heart. Keep mixing until the texture becomes thick enough that when you drag the spoon across the skillet, you can see the bottom for 1 or 2 seconds before the mixture closes again. That is the perfect point. Transfer the mixture to a bowl, cover it, and place it in the refrigerator for 2 to 3 hours, or until firm enough to shape. After chilling, take small portions of the mixture with your hands and roll them into balls, like this. Place the balls in a bowl with more Nesquik powder and move them around until they are fully coated. And that's it. You get soft, creamy chocolate truffles made with Nesquik, with an incredibly delicious flavor and a finish that looks simple but tastes amazing. Follow for more recipes. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Did you know that if you mix sweetened condensed milk with Nesquik, you can make an exotic and extremely delicious dessert that will surprise everyone? Start by adding 1 large tablespoon of butter to a skillet over medium heat. Stir until the butter melts completely. Once melted, add 2 tablespoons of Nesquik powder and keep stirring. Let it cook for a little while until the mixture becomes thicker, darker, and more concentrated. Now add 1 can of sweetened condensed milk and continue cooking over medium heat, stirring constantly so it doesn't stick or burn. While you're stirring, write the name of the city you're watching from in the comments and I'll leave you a heart. Keep mixing until the texture becomes thick enough that when you drag the spoon across the skillet, you can see the bottom for 1 or 2 seconds before the mixture closes again. That is the perfect mixture with your hands and roll them into balls, like this. Place the balls in a bowl with more Nesquik powder and move them around until they are fully coated. And that's it. You get soft, creamy chocolate truffles made with Nesquik, with an incredibly delicious flavor and a finish that looks simple but tastes amazing. Follow for more recipes. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Did you know that if you mix sweetened condensed milk with Nesquik, you can make an exotic and extremely delicious dessert that will surprise everyone? Start by adding 1 large tablespoon of butter to a skillet over medium heat. Stir until the butter melts completely. Once melted, add 2 tablespoons of Nesquik powder and keep stirring. Let it cook for a little while until the mixture becomes thicker, darker, and more concentrated. Now add 1 can of sweetened condensed milk and continue cooking over medium heat, stirring constantly so it doesn't stick or burn. While you're stirring, write the name of the city you're watching from in the comments and I'll leave you a heart. Keep mixing until the texture becomes thick enough that when you drag the spoon across the skillet,
It's starting to look like a proper village.
Why did you grab a knife out of my hand like that? Why would you hold this blade when you're handing it to me? Hey, look! You're the crap out of me! Okay, well, what's going on here? Well, we were washing the dishes, and when I went to hand it,
This culture.
genius over here, he grabbed it out of my hand before I could let go and sliced my whole freaking hand open. Joey That's not good. What's that? Should I go to the hospital? Yes.
Could you give me some directions on what I should do?
Why would you grab my knife out of my hand like that? Why would you hold this blade when you're handing it to me? Hey, look!
The village is slowly developing.
Furniture making is almost as impossible as swimming.
What a sculpture.
So I had this video uploaded yesterday, but I took it down to fix some visual issues with it. Well, there's a few issues with the video, but I wanted to fix
The
that.
weather is about to
I went through the
change.
process of fixing it,
I felt it in my left
re-rendered
elbow.
everything, and I actually just recorded a new intro for it. And in the process of getting the final render done to upload it, I realized that the old issue was gone, but there's an even bigger issue with it now. So I'm just taking out that for this video. I'm just not even going to do that whole caption thing in this video. I'll tweak it and figure it out for the next one. Yeah, I'm done messing with that. I'm not rendering this video for a fifth time again. So I'm recording this so I can slap this on the other intro where I said it was all fixed. And I put up a poll a few days ago asking you all what the previous setting was, like forests, liminal spaces, isolated rooms, alien worlds, and you all selected Dark Forest, unless that has changed since I first made this intro yesterday and then had to remake it. But yeah, there's Forest story. I hope you liked it. Now, I'm definitely interested in hearing any feedback you have on the sound design for this one because there's a lot in it. Also, two things. First is here's another design of my logo / Darksonian character. I don't know if I've shown many of you this one. I'll put it up on screen in case you want to see. It's more of like a full body design instead of just the head. And the other thing I was going to say is the first two songs that play in this, including the one that's playing right now, this little intro thing, are new songs that I made for this story.
Damn, it's hard.
Making my full-fledged songs. And a reminder that I have a new album out on my Spotify and iTunes that has a bunch of my music, some old, some new. And if you want to check it out, I'd love to know what you think. And with all that said, enjoy the video. Martin pressed the record button on the handheld unit and held it close to his mouth as he ducked under the rope the patrol officers had
I'm roasting out here.
October 14th, 1972. George Washington Park, Centralia. Arrived on scene at approximately 9:45 in the morning. Initial assessment. 4 victims, male, adults, suspended, inverted from separate trees. All 4 wearing hunting clothing. Rifles and sidearms still on their persons. Robbery does not appear to be a motive.
He released the bug and stood still for a minute, taking in the scene properly before getting closer. The morning light was coming through the canopy at a low angle, catching the dew on the grass, throwing long shadows across the ground. The 4 men hung in each row, each from a different oak, their left ankles tied to a branch with what looked like a red hemp rope. Their arms hung straight down toward the earth, fingers slightly curled. Their faces were dark, full of blood. He pressed record again.
The hanging configuration is deliberate and consistent across all 4 bodies. Ritualistic presentation cannot be ruled out. 2 possible reference points come to mind. First, the martyrdom of St. Peter, who was crucified inverted at his own request. Second, the hanged man card in the tarot deck, which depicts a figure suspended from 1 foot in a posture nearly identical to this. We'll revisit both lines of thinking once more information is available.
He released the bud and walked toward the nearest body. He crouched down, bringing his face level with the man's head. There were small cuts all over, but the main wounds were concentrated on the torso, inconsistent with a straight blade. He tilted his head and examined the margins of one of the larger wounds on the man's side.
Oh, have I seen this?
Wounds across all visible portions of the torso appear to have been inflicted by a serrated instrument. Jagged, consistent with repeated stabbing.
I really just need a
Or a small
police.
number of strikes. This was not efficient. This took time. There also appears to be what I can only describe as hundreds of paper cuts all over the exposed skin.
He stood and moved to the second body, then the third, finding the same pattern each time. By the fourth, he'd stopped recording and was simply looking, his hands on his coat pockets, the recorder hanging from his fingers. His apprentice, a younger man named Drew Kowalski, appeared at his shoulder. Drew had a notepad and kept glancing at it as he spoke, the way he always did when he was trying to make sure he delivered information correctly.
Jogger found her around 4 in the morning. A woman, early 30s. She runs around this park most days before work. She called it in from a payphone on Maple. Officers arrived on the scene by 4:20.
Any chance she saw anyone else out there?
She said no. Just the bodies.
Martin looked up at the nearest man's boot, careful now of the road.
Identifications.
Drew looked at his notepad.
All 4 from Seattle. They drove down together 2 days ago from a hunting trip. Carl Detman, 51. His brother Roy Detman, 48. A man named Phil Okafor, 44. And a Thomas Bridewell, 52.
The heat is
Men out of
unbearable.
Seattle for a hunting trip. And they ended up here.
There's a 5th man in their group. He came forward about an hour ago. Talked to one of the patrol officers. Says he stayed back in town yesterday while the other 4 went out. Claims they left in the morning and he never saw them again.
Martin looked at him.
Where is he now?
Probably still at the hotel. They were all staying at the Landers just off the main road. About a 5-minute drive.
Martin pressed record one more time as he turned and
The
walked
heat
back toward the
is
road.
unbearable.
Proceeding to interview 5th member of the hunting party. We'll update notes following interview.
He clicked it on and slipped the recorder into his coat pocket. Drew fell into step beside him as they crossed the wet grass toward the parking area, the trees behind them still holding their grim weight in the pale October light. The room smelled like cigarettes,
2,
a particular
3,
stale one
4.
that had been running all night. Martin sat in the chair beside the small desk, Drew standing near the door with his notepad. Bob Ellers was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s, sitting on the edge of the bed with his hands clasped between his knees.
I already told all this to the officer this morning.
I know you did. But I appreciate your patience. I just need to hear it myself. How long have you known Carl, Roy, Phil, and Thomas?
Carl and I go back to high school. The others, maybe 15 years, give or take. We've all been close a long time.
And this hunting trip, had you all done this before? Come down to Centralia specifically.
Every year. This would have been our 6th time, I think. Maybe 7th. We like it. It's quiet. The hunting's good.
Do you know anyone in Centralia? Anyone you've gotten friendly with over the years? A local you stay in touch with?
Not really. We keep to ourselves when we're down here. It's about the hunting, not the socializing.
Is there anyone who might have known you were coming? Someone from back in Seattle? Maybe someone who knew your routine?
Bob looked at him.
You mean like an enemy?
Like anyone who might wish the group harm. It's where you be.
No,
Bob said flatly without hesitation.
we're not that kind of people. We work, we get together on weekends. We do this trip once a year. Nobody has enemies. That's not our life.
Martin nodded.
Walk me through everything from the time you arrived in Centralia until this morning.
take long?
Everything you can remember.
We got in yesterday afternoon, around 2, maybe 2:30. Checked in here, dropped our bags, then we went for lunch at that diner on the main road. After that, we walked over to the hunting shop, just the browse. Phil ended up buying a new scope. Spent about 20 minutes talking to the man behind the counter about it. But then we just walked around town for a while, looked in some of the shop windows. Nothing specific, just passing time. We came back here for dinner, ate at the hotel restaurant. Then we went to the bar down the street for drinks.
Which bar?
Hannigan's, I think. The one with the green sign.
Okay. Go on.
We were there maybe 2 hours. It was a good night. Everybody was in a good mood. Phil got talking to a woman at the bar, a young woman, late 20s maybe. She had that kind of look, you know? Long skirts, lots of beads, a hippie type.
Just Phil.
Phil and Thomas both ended up sitting with her. The rest of us were at the other end of the bar. I could see them talking, but I wasn't part of the conversation.
Do you know what they talked about?
She did some kind of hero breathing with Phil and Thomas both. I remember thinking it was funny. Phil's not that kind of guy, but he was eating it up.
Martin leaned forward slightly.
Do you know her name?
I never caught her. Like I said, I wasn't over there with her. Only Phil and Thomas really spent time with her.
What happened at the end of the night?
Phil left with her. Just the two of them. The rest of us came back here around 11. Phil didn't show up until maybe 1 in the morning. Said he almost got lucky with the hippie.
Bob's mouth tightened.
We
Maybe
gave
if
him
I
a hard
pretend
time
that
about
I'm
it the way he
busy,
did.
no one
Then we all
will
went to bed.
notice that I don't have a job.
Early morning.
Hunting trip. But you didn't go.
My knee.
He patted his left leg.
It's been bad for a couple weeks. I thought I could push through, but when I woke up, I could barely get down the stairs. I told him to go without me. I was gonna rest it and meet them for dinner tonight. That was the last time I saw him.
Martin let a moment pass, and then reached into his jacket and produced a folded road map of the area. He opened it and held it out to Bob.
Can you show me where the hunting spot was?
My uncle
Where they were headed this morning?
Bob took the map and studied it for a moment, then pressed his finger down to a stretch of wooded land.
Somewhere in here. We have a spot we've used before. Down a dirt trail, barely wide enough for the truck. I've only been in there a few times. My knee's been a problem for a few years now.
Martin took the map back and studied the area Bob had indicated, then folded it and put it away.
Thank you, Bob. I mean that. I know this has been a terrible morning.
Bob looked at the floor and said nothing. Martin stood, buttoned his coat, and nodded to Drew. They let themselves out into the hallway and walked toward the stairwell without speaking until they were outside in the parking lot. The cold air settled around them.
Hanigans, before we go anywhere near that hunting spot, I want to find this woman.
You think a bartender would know her?
It's a small town, and she apparently makes an impression.
He opened the car door.
Let's find out.
Onward!
Hannigan's was dim, even in the middle of the morning. The kind of bar that never quite admitted
Giddy
daylight,
up.
regardless of the hour. Two men sat at the opposite end of the counter, nursing coffee, and a woman in her 40s was wiping down the taps with a rag. She looked up when Martin and Drew came through the door. Martin showed his badge, and she sat the rag down.
We're looking for a woman who was in here last night. Late 20s, describes to us as having a bohemian appearance. Long skirts, jewelry. She was doing tarot readings for some of the patrons.
The bartender's expression shifted into something that was not quite a smile.
That's Ingrid.
You know her?
She's in here probably 4 nights a week. Has been for, I don't know, a year now maybe. She comes in, sits at the bar, and the men find their way over to her. She's very pretty. She does the cards for them, and they love it.
She picked up the rag again, more out of habit than purpose.
She usually ends up leaving with someone who reunites her.
Every time.
More often than not.
The heat
Has she ever
is
caused any trouble
unbearable.
here?
Never. She's quiet. She's polite with me. She pays her tab. Whatever she gets up to after she walks out that door is her own business.
Her last name. Do you know it?
Cullum. Ingrid Cullum.
Drew wrote it down.
Do you have an address for her? Anything she might have left on a tab? A check?
She always pays with cash. But I know she lives out of town. She's mentioned it. Far out, like 40 miles or so. I couldn't tell you more than that.
Martin thanked her, and they stepped back out into the gray morning. The clerk at the town hall was a thin, older man who seemed pleased to have something to do. He pulled the property registration ledgers without complaint and set them on the counter. Martin and Drew went through them methodically. There was no listing for any Ingrid Callum. No property, no registered address, nothing. Drew turned a page and ran his finger down a column, then stopped.
George Callum. Property registered 1966.
Martin leaned over and looked. The listed address placed the property approximately 40 miles outside of Centralia, out along a rural road that wound northeast through the forest. Martin unfolded his map on the counter and found the road. He traced it with his finger until he located the approximate position of the property.
I'm roasting
Then
out
held
here.
the map flat and found the spot Bob had pressed his finger against that morning. Less than a mile separated them. He folded the map slowly.
George Callum is probably a relative. Father. Maybe an uncle.
Possibly.
Martin buttoned the top button of his coat.
What I know is that Ingram Talum did tarot readings for our victims, leaves with one. And it just so turns out that a property registered to someone with her surname sits less than a mile from where our victims went to go hunting.
He picked up the map.
That makes her our primary suspect.
Drew looked at him.
You think a woman in her late 20s did that to 4 armed men?
I think she may not have done it alone.
Oh, the
Moved towards
sculpture.
the door.
Let's go find her and see what else this story has to say.
They drove out of Centralia as the clouds thickened overhead, and the tree line on either side of the road grew denser, the oaks giving way to older firs that pressed close to the shoulder. The address was 41 miles by the odometer, along a road that became gravel after the first 30, the stones clicking up against the undercarriage as they pushed further into the trees. Neither of them spoke for most of the drive. The house looked less like something that had been constructed and more like something that had simply accumulated over decades. The walls thick with climbing vines, the porch sagging gently under the weight of ceramic planters and stacked firewood. The roofline was irregular in a way that suggested additions made without much planning, and the whole structure sat back from the road as though it had been slowly retreating into the tree line behind it. A Chrysler Windsor, old and dark green, sat in the dirt out front with a film of mud along its lower panels. 2 boys were crouched near the base of a large fir, arranging sticks into some configuration
Damn, it's
that had
hot.
meaning only to them. When the car came to a stop, the smaller one looked up, stared for half a second, then scrambled to his feet and ran for the front door without a word. The older boy stood up slowly and watched them get out of the car with an expression that was more curious than alarmed. Martin and Drew had barely made it to the edge of the porch steps when the front door opened and a man came to his shoulders with a kind of stillness in his posture that came either from confidence or from living far from other people for a long time.
Help you with something?
Martin held up his badge.
My name's Martin Stanzi. I'm a detective investigating the deaths of 4 men found in George Washington Park this morning. I'm looking for an Ingrid Callum. I have reasons to believe she was among the last people to see those men alive, and I'd like to speak with her.
The man looked at the badge, then at Martin, then at Drew. He leaned down and set the rifle against the porch railing.
George Callum. That's my wife. She's inside.
He pushed the door open and held it.
Come on.
The interior was dim and smelled like wood smoke or something herbal. The furniture was mismatched, but not uncomfortable looking, and every flat surface held something. Candles or dry bundles of plants or small arrangements of stones and feathers. George led them to a dining table near the back of the main room and pulled up chairs.
Damn, it's hot.
Sit down. I'll go get her.
He disappeared down the hallway. Martin and Drew settled into their chairs. And a moment later, 2 boys appeared in the doorway to the dining room, the younger one half hidden behind his brother's shoulders. The older boy walked in and stood at the corner of the table with his arms at his side. I'm David, and this is my brother, Henry. Henry raised one hand briefly in a wave.
Good to meet you both. I'm Martin. I'm here to talk to your mother for a little while.
David studied him with a directness that was unusual for a child his age. Are you here to fight our dad? Martin blinked.
No. Why would you think that?
Henry stepped out from behind his brother. People show up a lot and they want to fight Dad. A lot of people don't like him, David added, in the tone of someone stating a simple fact. Martin kept his expression neutral.
Why would people want to fight your father?
Because of Mom. The men see her and they want her, and they want to fight Dad to get her.
Let's see. It's good to have a strong dad, isn't it? If you don't mind me asking, what did you boys get up to yesterday?
The forest, Henry said immediately. We were in the forest all day. We found a bear skull, David added. A big one. We brought it back and put it in the woodpile.
Do you go far into the forest?
Pretty far. We know all the trails.
Do you ever see other people out there? Hikers,
I'm
hunters?
roasting out here.
David shrugged. Sometimes hunters come through in the fall, mostly.
Did you see any hunters yesterday?
David looked at Henry. Henry looked at the table. No, David said. Martin nodded slowly.
Do you boys go to school in town?
Mom teaches us here, Henry added.
What are you studying right now?
Psalms, Henry said, making a face. And reading, David said. Mom's been reading us old stories. Old ones from before regular books.
Do you like them?
Some of them are scary, Henry added. But David likes the scary ones. And someone has to, David said without apology. Martin smiled faintly. He let the conversation rest for a moment and glanced down the hallway where George had disappeared. The house was quiet except for the sound of wind against the irregular roofline. Drew leaned slightly toward Martin and said, under his breath,
He's taking a long time.
He is.
He turned back to the boys.
David, Henry, would you mind going and telling your dad and your mom that we're ready when they are?
The boys looked at each other, then ran off down the hall. Sitting still. Their footsteps receded, the door opened, and the house went quiet again. Martin and Henry sat without speaking. Somewhere outside, a branch scraped against the wood. A candle on the sideboard had burned low enough that its light barely reached the center of the table. After another 2 minutes, footsteps returned down the hallway, slower this time. George came in first. Behind him came Martin. She was, as the bartender had suggested, and as Bob Powers had not quite done the words for, very strange. She was tall and dark-haired, with a kind of composed, unhurried quality in her movement that made the room seem to rearrange itself around her. She was wearing a neat gypsy dress, flowing with beads and flowery laces. She met Martin's eye as she sat down across from him, but did not look away. George sat beside her, closed his hands on the table. Martin opened his notebook.
Thank you all for making the time.
Martin flipped the recorder on and set it on the table.
Ingrid, I'd like to hear from you about last night. You were at Hannigan's bar and you spent time with two of the victims. Can you walk me through what you remember?
Ingrid opened her mouth, but was interrupted. She opened. Her voice was still. Martin looked at her. He was not agitated. His hands were still folded on the table. Martin reached over and picked up the recorder.
Mr. Cowell, you're telling me you're responsible for the deaths of Carl Desmond, Roy Desmond, and Thomas Bergman. That's right. I need you to tell me how, and I need you to tell me why. proceeding on foot to the victim's vehicle location northeast of the Callum property. Prisoner George Callum in custody. Time, approximately 3 in the afternoon. He released the bud and moved to Drew. Stay close. Don't walk off the road for any reason.
Drew nodded and said nothing, though his eyes moved briefly to the tree line, the way it suggested the instruction had landed on a low grate far at the top. George walked between them at an easy pace, as though the cuffs behind his back were of no more consequence than his jacket. The gravel crunched under their feet, and the birds pressed close on either side. Their upper branches knitting together overhead to a ceiling that glittered with perfumed dazzling light into something thin and colorless. George said, "It's not a question." Neither of them answered.
Tell your colors, your electric lights, your phones, all that wire stuck between the poles, all that extra uniform on the ground so you don't have to touch it.
He tilted his head slightly as he walked, as though he was listening to something in the trees.
You think distance from the natural world is something you've earned. Mr. Callum, you don't need to talk. No, I don't. But you should hear this before it's over. There's something very important that has been watching both men and women. Something none of us yet people have ever stories, ever said of all this machinery, all this industry, all these cities spreading out across the land like a sickness. It's all been getting its attention, pulling its eyes towards us.
Drew kept his gaze on the road ahead.
The only answer is to go back, climb up the trees, eat what the land offers, stop poisoning the ground and stringing wire through the sky. That's not primitivism. That's survival. That's the only thing that closes the eyes back up. Unfortunately, it's a little too late for that. The men I killed yesterday didn't understand that. They came into the forest with their guns to take from it, and they never once considered that the forest had an opinion on them. And was the forest's opinion required 4 men to be stabbed repeatedly and hung upside down from trees? The forest isn't judgment. I never told you it was, but being killed by a tree is a particular kind of pain. There's nothing fast about it. The woods find the soft places.
He looked sideways at Martin with a kind of clinical interest.
You understand that soon enough. All of you.
Drew said nothing, but Martin could hear the change in his breathing. Martin unfolded the map without slowing his pace and studied as he walked. The gravel road continued another quarter mile before the trail broke off to the right, cutting northeast through the forest toward the area that Bob had indicated. He could already see, as they rounded a slight bend, where the trail now opened between 2 large firs. And there, pressed into the soft earth at the trail's edge, were tire tracks. Wide set, heavy tread, a truck.
Mr. Dodger,
Martin said, holding the map. Drew looked at the trail. The tree cover was uneven and dense. The path swallowed by shadow within 40 feet of the road.
I don't like it.
George looked at him.
You're afraid not to. Don't do that. She's right. The trail goes through the old growth. Those trees have been there longer than the cities existed. They knew what I told them.
Drew had stopped walking. He was standing in the trail now, looking into it with his notepad held against his chest like a small shield.
What? What if he's telling the truth? He's not telling the truth. He's a man in handcuffs who killed 4 people and is trying to frighten us into making a poor decision. The truck is down here. We need the truck. What if he's not there? Then we'll make another decision. Come on.
Drew looked at the trees for another moment, and then stepped onto the trail behind him. George ran. He turned off the path to the left and simply bolted, straight into the forest, his cuffed arms locked behind his back, his body tilting forward at a sharp angle to compensate. He was fast, far faster than a man in his position had any right to be, and within seconds, the dark green of his jacket was flickering between the trunks and then gone entirely. Martin was already moving. He got 3 strides into the trees before he stopped himself. The forest was very quiet. He stood still and listened. George's footsteps had already ceased. No cracking branches, no rustling undergrowth, nothing. The man had disappeared into the old growth as cleanly as the wildlife that called it home. Martin walked back to the trail, and Drew was standing exactly where he had been. not having moved an inch.
Do we go after him?
Martin looked into the trees for a long moment.
Prisoner George Callum fled custody at approximately 3:15 on foot into forested area northeast of Centralia. Pursuit deemed inadvisable. We get to the truck, we drive back into town, we get a proper search team, and we come back with more people and more light.
He started down the trail without waiting for Drew's response. After a moment, Drew followed. They had been on the trail for perhaps 10 minutes when Martin stopped walking. Drew nearly walked into him. In the center of the path, occupying the full width of the trail between the flanking undergrowth, stood a bush. It's not a sound. It's the church. 3 feet across the base. Martin, the road, dark and forest. The tire tracks ran straight up to it on one side, continued straight away until the other. Martin crouched down and looked at the tracks on both sides. Same tread, same depth, same space. The drum. Stood out that double.
Are you sure you could have been there when the truck was through?
Drew took a step back.
No. So either the truck went straight through it, or it moved. I think we should go back to the Callum house. Wait there until someone comes looking for us.
George could be back at that house by now. He knows these woods, and we don't. If he's back there, he's back at his rifle. We'd be walking up to that drive with no vehicle and no cover.
He stepped around the base of the tree, testing the ground, then continued up the trail.
The truck is our only way out of here.
Drew looked at the tree for another moment, then followed. The creaking began a few minutes later. It started low, a single groan from somewhere off to the left. The sound expressed longing. The sound just shook, mixing at one, then another from the right, then ahead of him, then behind. The canopy above began to move, slow and lateral. A swaying that had nothing to do with the wind, because there was no wind. The air between the trunks was completely still. Martin kept his eyes on the trail and walked faster. Drew was at his shoulder now, no longer maintaining any professional distance, his breathing audible. The creaking deepened and multiplied until it was coming from every direction at once. A low wooden course that seemed to press in from the tree line on both sides. The trunk nearest the trail was visibly moving, slow rocking, their root system shifting the soil at their bases in small rhythmic upheavals. Martin's hand had found the grip of his holstered weapon without him consciously deciding to put it there. Then the tree line opened and they were in the clearing. Martin stopped. The truck was there. It was a blue Ford pickup, or it had been. The cab was collapsed inward, as if something had closed around it from both sides with tremendous force. The windshield was gone. The roof had been pressed down to the level of the dashboard. The bed was split lengthwise, the metal peeled outward in long, curving strips. One door was 30 feet away in the undergrowth, as though it had been pulled free and discarded. Parallel gouges ran across every surface, consistent with something serrated dragged slowly through steel. Drew made a sound that was not quite a word.
I was right.
He said, his voice climbing.
I told you this was wrong. I told you we shouldn't have come down that trail.
We'll go back.
Martin said. His voice was steady, but quieter than usual.
You believe me now?
I believe we need to leave this location immediately.
He turned around. The trail was gone. Behind him was a forest, continuous, unbroken. The trunks standing close together with no gap between them. No path, no opening, no indication that anything had ever passed through it in either direction. The tree line where the trail mouth should have been was as solid and undifferentiated as a wall. Martin stood very still and looked at it. The creaking had stopped. The forest was perfectly silent. Drew was standing beside him and not speaking, which was in some ways worse than the panic. Martin turned slowly in a full circle, trees in every direction. In between them, the light was going. The overcast sky above the canopy darkening by degrees as the afternoon moved toward evening. He could not see more than 40 feet in any direction before the trunks and the shadows swallowed whatever lay beyond. The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, threading itself out of the ambient silence the way a sound does when you cannot be certain it's real. It was at the periphery at first, a shape in the air rather than a sound, something that pressed at the edge of comprehension without quite resolving into language. Then, slowly, over the span of perhaps a minute, it found its form. words were quiet and slow. The hair on Martin's neck stood up. The words were sourceless. Martin had his weapon out before he fully registered why. Drew was beside him with his own draw. Both of them were facing the tree line where the whispers seemed loudest, where the shadows between the trunks had begun to shift and consolidate into something with a shape. George came out of the forest, walking slowly. His wrists were still cupped behind his back. His lips were moving.
Stop. Stop right there.
George did not stop. Martin fired, and again. Drew fired twice beside him. The shots were very loud in the clearing. George continued walking. His expression did not change. His shirt showed nothing of the bullet's onslaught. Martin adjusted and fired again and again, methodical and controlled by the way he'd been trained. Drew was firing as fast as he could pull the trigger. Drew's weapon clicked dry. He kept pulling the trigger for a moment before he registered it. Then he lowered his gun and stood holding it at his side, his chest heaving. The creaking began again, and beneath it, a whisper continued. And now the trees were moving, not swaying, moving. The root system at their bases were pulling free of the soil with sounds like tearing fabric. Dense, wet pops as the earth gave way, and the trunks were walking, slow and grinding. The whole circumference of the clearing shrinking inward degree by degree. The root came from beneath Martin's left foot before he saw it. It punched up through the soil and curled around his boot. He tried to pull free and could not. Another found Drew's ankle, then his calf. The roots began burying themselves into the terrified man's flesh. More roots came. They thickened and pushed upward through the soles of their boots and began to move with terrible patience up through the layers. The ground around their feet was churning. Leaves dripped from the moving trees came in horizontal streams, spinning fast, their edges finding every exposed surface, the face, hands, and neck. Dozens of small cuts opening all at once, then dozens more. Drew screamed. Martin screamed beside him. A sound pulled out of him without permission. The pain total and without interval. Martin looked at Drew. Drew's face was sheeted with blood from the leaves, and below his knees, the ground had swallowed him to mid-shin, the roots working upward. His eyes were wild with something beyond fear, something that had passed fear entirely, came out the other side into pure animal suffering. Martin raised the gun. He did not hesitate. The shot caught Drew right between the eyes. His suffering was over. Martin turned the gun to his own temple. He closed his eyes. The cylinder was empty. He pulled the trigger 3 more times into the silence. The mechanical click of the hammer falling on spent chambers, the only sound he could produce. George was standing in front of him, close enough to touch. He was smiling the same smile he had worn at the dining table. "There's no tomorrow for you," George said. Martin opened his mouth to scream in agony. The tree arrived from his left, a trunk that had walked itself to within arm's reach while he had been looking at George. The branch came low and fast. The kitchen light was on when George came up the driveway, warm, yellow, in the front window. Ingrid was standing at the door before he reached the porch steps. She looked at his face and knew.
How did it go?
It's done, George said. He came up the steps and stood in front of her.
The sacrifice has been made. There's now one left.
Ingrid's eyes filled with tears as she looked away from him, out towards the tree line. Her jaw worked for a moment before she spoke.
Is there any other way? George, please tell me, is there any other way at all?
There isn't.
I'm gonna miss you. The kids are gonna miss you.
She said.
Mr. Brinkman, the Darling family is here to see you. The Darlings heard the thud of something dropping, the screech of a chair being reflexively pushed backwards so hard it smashed into the wall, and the clattering of a cabinet door being rapidly opened and slammed shut again over the intercom before Paxton Brinkman answered his secretary's page. The whole family, you say? Sweet little darling Sarah, too? He asked enthusiastically, though failing to completely hide the strain in his voice. Hello, Mr. Brinkman, Sarah shouted cheerfully over the intercom. We're dreadfully sorry to have dropped in unannounced, but Daddy Darling promised me a flying car, and you're the only place we know where we can get one. Would you like me to department, sir? The secretary asked, giving the trio of dapper degenerates an uneasy eye. Their three sinisterly and tears-bound faces were so hard, she was ready to hit the silent alarm the instant her was getting Not necessary, Jenny, not necessary. I always have time for my favorite customers. He laughed. There was a sound of a drawer opening, likely a gun moving, and a glass dish clinking before Paxton Brinkman stepped out of his office and entered the expensive and gloriously retro-futuristic lobby of Oppenheimer's Opportunities Administration Floor. Mr. Brinkman, Sarah squealed as she ran up and tightly wrapped her arms around him like he was a beloved relative. Hello there, easy kiddo. Not all of us are as young as we used to be. The centenarian laughed as he gravely ruffled her perpetually youthful head. Nonsense, Paxton. You barely aged a day since we met. James flattered him as he and Mary closed the distance between them while Sarah held him inescapably in place. What's your secret? It's no secret, James. I'm a religious user of Oppenheimer's Opportunities' very own formulation of graphene. It's radioactive frequency, carefully calibrated for maximum hormesis, Paxton said, as he proudly pulled out the small, cobalt blue glass vial. It may not compare to that black vial of yours, but it will keep a mere mortal on their feet and working for up to 150 years. I don't generally approve of doling out medicine to the intervention to unjustly embellish their lives, but you're very selective with your clientele and have personally proven yourself worthy of life and vitality through your tireless work ethic. Sarah smiled at him. Sarah's right, Paxton. You're one of the good ones, and we would never let any harm come to someone so very useful to us, Mary assured him. Your household appliances are unsurpassed by anything else in the market, and your DIY home reactor kit was a godsend. That was technically intended for a bunker, but I'm glad you were able to adapt it for your needs. Now, did I hear Sarah correctly that you finally decided to get with the times and buy yourself a flying car? You did indeed, Mr. Brinkman, James said in a slightly defeatist tone. I know I said before that they weren't covert enough for our purposes, and that I find the idea of owning a car I can't maintain myself effeminate. But we recently found ourselves in a bit of a crunch regarding our transportation options. On top of that, an old friend of ours showed up with a flying car of her own, so there is a social aspect factoring into it as well. Outstanding. Keeping up with the Joneses is a crucial driver of economic growth. Outdoing your neighbors ensures we all keep spending more and more in a virtuous cycle of conspicuous consumption. Paxton cheered with a celebratory palm of his fist. Let's head right on down to the sales floor to see what we have in stock. This car your friend had didn't happen to be one of ours, did it? No. From what we've been able to gather, she's stolen from a futuristic parallel universe that had been overrun with biblically accurate Nephilim of some sort or another, James said, as they headed towards the oversized, omnidirectional elevator. I imagine that makes it a classic, since it's no longer in production. I can beat that, James. You know that all our Forever 59 products are classics the instant they roll off the assembly line. You won't be able to find a brand new classic anywhere else, Paxton boasted, effortlessly selecting the button for the Aeromotive sales floor out of the myriad of bizarrely labeled buttons on the control panel. It levitated using flux pinning, so it couldn't fall out of the sky even if the power failed, Sarah continued. Not that it would ever with a cold fusion palladium deuterium reactor. Young lady, cold fusion is for crackpots, commies, and an alien shadow government that I have to pay dues to, but am otherwise forbidden from officially acknowledging, Paxton replied sharply. No, Sarah. Fission is the tried and true fuel of the future, and my flying cars are all powered by multi-megawatt plutonium microcores. They're propelled by inductive plasma thrusters, and the ventral thrusters never shut off unless the landing struts are firmly on the ground. Are they supersonic? Mary asked. Veronica's car was supersonic. It could even go to space. Well, our model's cruising speed is about 400 miles per hour, but they could be pushed much closer to the speed of sound in a pinch. But it sounds like your friend has more of a sports model than a luxury one. And if my aged memory still serves, Sarah Darling's no fan of sports cars.
Let's go.
You're quite right, Mr. Brinkman. They scream new money, Sarah said with a disdainful wiggle of her nose.
Onward.
Remember, Mommy darling, we're trying to outclass Miss Mason, not outrun her. We're not getting a sports car. Performance is still important, Sarah darling. I'm not entirely convinced that Mr. Brinkman's offerings are on par with what Veronica had. Maybe we should take a look around at that reality ourselves and see if we can find anything. Are you trying to embarrass me? Sarah demanded, the timbre of her voice itching just a hair above spoiled preteen girl and into humanoid abomination. We are not going dumpster diving in a post-apocalyptic wasteland to scavenge an abandoned car that's been rusting for decades. We are buying a respectable new car appropriate to our status as gilded, well-bred, arcane aristocracy. Is that clear, Mommy darling? Now, Sarah, darling, that's hardly an appropriate tone to take with your mother. James gently scolded her, placing his hands on her shoulder to hold her back, should the need arise. She wasn't trying to embarrass you. She simply doesn't have the exact same taste in cars as you and I. And, Mary darling, if I recall, Veronica needed a specialist to jailbreak her car's computer systems, something which wouldn't exactly be practical for us. Paxton's vehicles may not be the greatest in all the world by every possible metric, but we can trust him to stand by his products far more than a long-dead civilization. Isn't that right, Mr. Brinkman? You have my word, Mr. Darling. Any problems at all, and you just bring her back here, and we'll get it fixed up and no questions asked. Paxton vowed, as the elevator door slid open, with Mary beating Paxton out to the sprawling sales floor of polished chrome. And here we are, all our latest Forever 59 models, ready to fly right off the lot. Sarah's mood instantly shifted back to one of childlike delight as she eagerly strolled in between the cars, her gaze shifting rapidly from one to the next as she tried to decide which was her favorite. If the missus is dead set on something sporty, the Roadsters here will be your best bet. But you'll no doubt be wanting a floating land yacht as your family vehicle, Paxton said, as he led James and Mary down the path their daughter had laid out for them. There's the Hindenburg, the Sky Tennic, the Icarus Ascendant, all names fully intended to tempt the gods with our hubris. The best way to succeed is to completely ignore the possibility of failure. That's what I always say. This one, Daddy, Sarah said, as she raced up to a deep burgundy-colored car with smooth, polished curves and long, sweeping fins. It had a miniature version of the Statue of Liberty for a hood ornament, and right behind that was a row of 4 glowing plutonium micro-cores sticking up out of the hood. It's beautiful. You've got impeccable taste there, little Sarah. That there is the new Manhattan Grand Tourer, our very finest. The body's made of our most impact-resilient titanium alloy. The windows are fused quartz, and the interior is upholstered in aramid fibers barely 12 microns thick, as soft as vicuna wool, 100% puncture-proof, guaranteed, and blood will wash right off of it. I know how important that is for you folks. What do you say, darlings? She can be yours for as little as 5,000 Gernsbacks. Want to take her for a test flight? Can we, Mr. Pinkman? Can we? Sarah beamed. Absolutely. The controls are so intuitive they're practically idiot-proof. You just push the yoke forward to go down, pull it back to pull up. Push it up to fire the vertical thrusters down, and then to fire them up, use the paddle shifters to fire the side thrusters. Otherwise, it's just like any other car. The gyroscopic stabilization system keeps it level, magneto sensors keep you from sideswiping buildings or other vehicles, and the radiometric transponder can keep you locked into our Skylane system. But you'll still be accompanying us, won't you, Mr. Binkman? James asked with a devious smile. Just in case? Of course. Happy to be of assistance. Paxton chuckled nervously. He courteously opened the rear driver's side door for Sarah, and then the rear passenger side door for Mary. Mary hesitated awkwardly for a moment, but ultimately decided that sitting next to her daughter was a safer bet than actively avoiding doing so. Before getting into the car himself, Paxton took a moment to go over more of some of the car's features with James, leaving Mary and Sarah alone in the back seat. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly, her gaze cast downwards in contrition, swinging her legs slightly. "What?" Mary asked, taken off guard by her daughter's unprompted and seemingly non-performative apology. I didn't mean to scare you. I wasn't going to hurt you. You know that, right?" she asked. "In public, but I don't think you're a bad mother or anything, and I'm not embarrassed by you. I know that Grandpa was a television repairman and that we aren't literally old money. We're better than old money. We're old gods. And I'm more sensitive about that than I should be. You and Daddy Darling are the best parents I could have hoped for, and I'm proud to be your daughter. I'll try my best to be more respectful, but if I get short with you again, please don't be scared of me. I don't like it when you're scared of me." "Sarah, darling, you didn't scare me. I was just giving you space to cool off," Mary claimed, as she put her arm around her and kissed her on the head. "I'm sorry if I made you feel overly abhorrent, but in my defense, I am unusually sober at the moment. Listen, Ducky, you're the most powerful of the three of us, and I'm the least, and that can be a little intimidating sometimes. But you should never feel bad about being superior, not even to me. But as your inferior, I'm here to serve you as your mother, and if you want me to do that by not becoming a shrinking violet every time you get cross with me, I can do that when I'm properly intoxicated. But you're absolutely right, that we need to keep a united front if we're going to overcome our enemies. So, if you can put up with your drunken, pill-addled, sports car-loving mom, then I can stop acting like you're the angel of death every time you lose your temper. Deal?" "Deal," Sarah said, hugging her tightly just as James and Paxton slid into the front seat of the car. "That's what I like to see. My two favorite girls getting along." James smiled at them before turning to study the dashboard in front of him. "There's no gearbox in this thing, I take it?" "Sadly, no. I know you love manuals, but there's no need for a transmission in this baby," Paxton said, as he sat next to him on the bench-style seat. "So, right in front of you is your instrument panel. There's the altimeter, navigation system, atmospheric conditions. I'm sure I'll figure it out," James said smugly, successfully turning on the nuclear engine and retracting the landing gear with the flip of a switch.
Let's go.
"James Darling has always had a knack for machines," Mary said proudly, as the plasma thrusters beneath them roared to life. "When we were only 13, he made his very first transethereal juxtapositor from nothing but an old radio." "You're too kind, Mary Darling.
Move on.
I did also technically have a small spinning spool of unseelie silver and a thaumaturgical tuning fork to calibrate it," James said, as he pulled the yoke down, while gently pressing on the accelerator pedal, causing the vehicle to slowly rise off of the floor. "Not bad, not bad. So, just straight through those hang doors then, Paxton. Well, you might want to take a few laps around the sales floor just to familiarize yourself with," Brinkman began, before the force of acceleration pinned him backwards as the car flew out the wide doors into the sprawling company town beyond. Cartoonishly, and at times grotesquely exaggerated Googie architecture dominated the skyline. Turquoise and pistachio and chrome saturated their entire field of view, with the power station's cooling towers rising above all of it like the spires of a concrete cathedral. "Would you look at that, girls? Old Oppenheim sure does look magnificent from this vantage point, doesn't it?" James asked rhetorically. "Of course, you've probably seen it like this more times than you can count, haven't you, Mr. Brinkman?" "That I have, Mr. Darling, but it doesn't make it any less magnificent." Paxton chuckled nervously, tightly clutching on to any handle he could reach. "Now, if you'll just merge into that sky lane there." "Nonsense. There won't be any sky lanes where we're going. We need to see how this thing handles in the open yonder," James said dismissively. "Actually, James Darling, what we really need to test out is how effective she is at evading enemy pursuit," Mary reminded him as she lit her cigarette. "You said this car was your very finest, Mr. Paxton. Does that include the vehicles you provide to Oppenheim's finest?" She nodded out the window, towards a black and white police cruiser hovering over the skyline, ready to swoop down at a moment's notice. "Oh, well, that can easily be arranged, Mrs. Darling. I'll just radio them, and that's no good, Mr. Brinkman. If it's not a real pursuit, it's not a real stress test. Fortunately, I should be able to get there with minimal difficulty." He swerved hard to the right and ran perpendicular through the skyline at full acceleration, T-boning the car directly in front of him, bashing in its side panels and knocking it clear out of the lane. The cars directly behind them slammed on the brakes, resulting in a horrific multi-car pileup as soon as they hit the ground. "I've never actually seen it rain flying cars before. It's magnificent," Sarah said as she gawked out the window, hoping that at least one of the crash landings would result in a nuclear explosion. The sound of a police siren suddenly rang out through the air, and sure enough, James could see the cruiser in hot pursuit in the rearview mirror. Much better. Hopefully, he'll call in some backup that would join us along the way. Paxton, now thoroughly in fear for his life and unwilling to play along any further, reached into his jacket to pull out his weapon. He froze the instant he felt the cold steel of Mary's knife press up against his throat. "Now, Mr. Brinkman, you wouldn't be thinking of doing something stupid, would you?" Mary whispered into his ear as she leaned forward from the rear seat, blowing her cigarette smoke sideways into his face. "You know you'd never kill all three of us at once." "It's a moot point anyway, Mummy darling. I grabbed his gun when I hugged him," Sarah said, proudly holding up the amazing atomic Americana atomizing laser. "This is a very impressive ray gun, Mr. Brinkman. A weapon powerful enough to reduce its target to its constituent atoms could actually be effective against us. But it would be even more effective if it was used by us." "Now, Sarah darling, don't go firing that thing off willy-nilly. The plutonium batteries for it are hard to come by," James told her, as he rapidly ducked up and down into a wooded series of pedestrian sky bridges linking multiple buildings together. "Don't worry, Daddy darling. I'm old enough to use a weapon of mass destruction responsibly," the eternal 11-year-old said with a gleeful smile. "Do you think that's the only atomic laser in Oppenheim? The police will vaporize us all if you continue your rampage," Paxton said, speaking as soft. "I imagine your city police force has far more training and experience with aerial dogfights than I do. Let's see how good they are at avoiding mid-air collisions." He violently swerved to the right, straight into the path of an oncoming cruiser. The cruiser drove downwards just in the nick of time, only for James to perform a sharp U-turn and charge into the pursuing convoy. "Charge 'em and they scatter," James quoted, and scatter they did, dispersing frantically in all directions. It did not, however, take them very long to regroup and correct course, and soon the entire convoy was about to overtake them once again. Rather than try the same trick twice, James instead allowed the Manhattan to drop like a stone and let the cruisers fly right over him, before merging into one of the busier sky lanes. Though he drove at a reckless speed, he adroitly wove through traffic, with any collisions being caused by his fellow aeromotus reflexively fleeing from his path. "James, please, enough of this. What do you want?" Paxton pleaded. "Well, I'm a bit concerned about fuel economy, truth be told," he said nonchalantly, breaking out of the sky lane as the cruisers began to catch up with them. "I know these plutonium microcores last longer than a tank of petrol, but they don't last forever, and that's where you make most of your margins. It's a bit of a racket if you ask me. Now, I don't want to put you out of business, Mr. Brinkman. Far from it. But I can't stand idly by as you so brazenly swindle us. I'm going to have to insist you throw in an extra pallet or two of those microcores to keep us flying." Yes, of course, anything." "Now, Daddy darling, it would hardly be fair of me to let you get away with penny pinching after I so rudely lost my temper with Mommy darling for exactly the same thing," Sarah said with a sweet smile. "But this is about principles, Sarah darling. He wants to sell us the car at a loss, so that he can count on us coming back for service. It's how these dealerships make most of their money, James told her, diving beneath a giant billboard for a nuclear-powered vacuum cleaner. A dive that the two cruisers behind him failed to match and ended up crashing into the billboard, sending shrapnel flying everywhere. Nevertheless, austerity is unbecoming of our station. Mr. Brinkman will be taking this Manhattan along with the Phaeton Roadster for Mommy Darling. It doesn't clash too horrendously with my taste, and if nothing else, it's a step up from her Corvette. And to address Daddy Darling's concerns, you will be providing us with a lifetime, all-inclusive concierge service, as I'm sure you don't want us in Oppenheim any more than absolutely necessary. Would you, Mr. Brinkman? Absolutely not. Full concierge service on both cars. You got it. Paxton agreed fervently. James was pulling up now, above the skyscrapers, and toward the atomic zeppelin that hung over the city. And you'll toss in a pack of the plutonium batteries for this ray gun into the glove compartment each time you send a car back to us? Sarah requested. Can do, Missy. Can't have a ray gun without batteries, can ya? He asked rhetorically. The zeppelin had started firing its own ato lasers now, as it seemed that James was aiming straight for the baronet. Not only did they miss, but James had skillfully positioned the vehicle so that the instant he swerved aside, the laser obliterated the police cruisers behind them. And you'll have a word with the constables to resolve this little misunderstanding to make sure that they don't cause us any trouble after we leave? Sarah asked, looking over her shoulder at the carnage with a gleefully sadistic grin. Yes, I'll let them all know that it was just a test drive, no wrongdoing on your part at all, and anything else? Do you have any candy? I do so love it when grown-ups give me candy, Sarah said sweetly. Paxton nodded, digging into his pocket and then reaching back to drop the hard white spheres into her hand. Scotch mints? She asked, glaring at them in disdain. It's all I had in my office, I swear. Just tell me what your favorite candies are, and I'll load the roadster up with them myself. You're missing the point, Mr. Brinkman, Sarah said, dropping the mints to the floor and lowering the window. The point is, you're willing to put in the effort to show you care about my happiness, not scrape together whatever happens to be at hand in a desperate bid to appease me. She leaned outwards, aiming the ato laser directly at the massive airship dead ahead of them. No, Sarah, please, not the Zeppelin, Paxton pleaded, but his plea fell on deaf ears. With one pull of the trigger, it was over. The Zeppelin's ballonet was engulfed in flames, forcing Paxton to watch in horror as it slowly crashed downward into the city's nuclear power plant. Oh, the humanity! James laughed as Mary cackled along with him. Sorry, Paxton, I couldn't resist. Well, I'd say our business here is complete, and it seems like you have a few fires you need to put out, so I won't keep you any longer. We'll be taking this baby home if you don't mind, but we'll get you your guns back, and then you can deliver the Phaeton. Don't forget the batteries and candy for Sarah. Just one box of small batch handcrafted chocolates will be plenty. As she made quite clear, it's the gesture she really cares about. Oh, and while you're at it, a bottle of your finest spirits for me and the missus, if you'd be so kind. Tut, James, darling. If it's in my car, then it's my booze, and I don't have to share, Mary insisted. Ah, fair enough, Mary darling, fair enough, James agreed, as he took the car down and pulled up next to a hovering sky buoy of some kind. You're leaving me here? Paxton stammered. The buoy barely had enough space for him to stand and precious little to grasp onto. I'm afraid so, Mr. Brinkman. After that whole kerfuffle, we need to be making a discreet and immediate exit. Paxton didn't argue further, taking advantage of his one chance of escape before the Darlings decided to throw him overboard. As he hugged the buoy for dear life, Mary reached forward and pulled the door shut, and they immediately sped away from Oppenheim at top speed. Well, girls, I'd say that went just as well about any of us could have hoped for, James grinned, as Oppenheim's primary nuclear reactor exploded in the rearview mirror, with Mary and Sarah immediately turning around to watch the calamity with delight. You don't think we overdid it, do you, James darling? Of course not, Mary darling. And Paxton himself has said that the occasional reactor meltdown is a small price to pay for progress, and we certainly made progress today, James assured her. We certainly have, Daddy darling. A flying car and an atomic disintegrator are no small additions to our arsenal, Sarah sang proudly. Maybe we should take a little detour to that reality where Miss Mason got her car so that we can practice delivering atomic hellfire on abandoned cities and wasteland mutants with impunity like the gods we are. Now that, Sarah darling, sounds like a perfect way to end a perfect day, James agreed, plugging his pocket-sized juxtapositor into the cigarette lighter and setting a course. Hey everybody, Kevin here from Nightmares Nightly. I hope you enjoyed that. That is another entry into the Darling Twins universe. There's like a 7-hour playlist on the channel right now with almost all of the stories and then a few more after that. I'm waiting until, I've got more stories, like maybe 9 or 10 hours worth to upload another new compilation. And please go check out the Vesper Spell. I will leave her links in the description down below, and her books that she has out also as well to purchase. Please go over, go on her Reddit, check her Amazon, all that stuff. Please show the Vesper's Bell some love, because the Darling Twins just so happen to be a favorite on the channel of me and most of you as well. They are the perfect mix of comedy and horror, and I cannot get enough of James, Mary, and Sarah Darling.
Well, that's the last of it, I said, breathing a sigh and collapsing on the couch. Officially toast. I just finished hauling the last living room, making a corrugated fortress around me. Unpacking would be another long adventure, but at least we had finally gotten all of our belongings into the farmhouse, so that we could begin the process of starting our new life here. As I lay on the couch, relaxing momentarily, the hairs began to stand up on the back of my neck. I started to get a strong sense that I was being watched. Specifically from the door beneath the stairs leading to the basement. It creaked open slowly, just a crack, as I observed it back. I closed my eyes, ignoring that paranoid feeling. There was no one else in the house except for us. Therefore, nobody was watching me, it was just my imagination. Yet still, every time I turned away, I felt a tingling and saw a vague shadow in that direction, just barely visible in my peripherals. There was also a feeling of presence that I could not ignore. The door to the basement yawned open wider, as if inviting me in. Darkness peered out, blacker than a midnight graveyard. Standing up on shaking legs, I began to walk over to that door, thinking a draft from the basement was blowing it open. I didn't like the feeling of it being ajar. Don't ask me why, but I just didn't like it. As I drew closer, the sensation of eyes watching me became more powerful. as if I was drawing closer to a predator. My body was telling me to turn away and run. That darkness was too much for me to look at. So I turned my eyes away briefly, but that made the feeling even worse. I couldn't help thinking that if something jumped out from that doorway, I wouldn't see it until it was too late. So I looked back again, forcing myself to focus my attention on the eerie blackness. When I returned my gaze to the doorway, I could have sworn I saw eyes looking at me from the darkness for a brief instant. So quick it could have just been passed off as a trick of the light, but it made my heart skip a beat nonetheless. I slammed the door shut so hard it shook the house, and my wife yelled at me to be more gentle with the old place. Heading into the kitchen, my heart was thumping in my chest, and I told Christine what had happened. What do you mean you saw eyes down there? There was somebody in the basement? We need to call the cops. Hang on. I was trying to decide if it was my overtired brain imagining things. I thought I'd seen something, but the more I considered it, the less likely it seemed. It could have just been my eyes playing tricks on me. I'll grab a flashlight and take a look. You can't, it's too dangerous. The place was locked up, right? So it couldn't have been a person down there. I was probably just imagining things. But I'll take a look just to be safe. You sure about this? Maybe we should call the police and have them check it out. It'll take them an hour just to get here. We're not in the city anymore, remember? Besides, there's no way anybody could have gotten in here since the owners left. Not unless they had a key. Just let me take a look, okay? Christine reluctantly agreed and took out her phone, dialing 911 and getting ready to hit send in case anything happened. I found a flashlight in one of the boxes marked camping and opened the basement door. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I began to descend. Proceeding down the rickety steps, the beam of light showed multitudes of dust motes and particles floating in the air, being kicked up by my movements. Ancient wooden stairs creaked beneath my feet with each step I took, going down and down, deeper beneath the earth. As I did, that feeling returned again. That sensation of something watching me. That unpleasant feeling began to grow and blossom into the worst fear I'd ever experienced in my life as I set my foot down onto the dirt-packed floor of the lower level. The old farmhouse had an ancient relic of a basement, I realized. Since we had moved from a long ways away, we hadn't seen the place in person. The first time I'd been down there. The owners had chosen not to include pictures of the basement in their ad, and I was beginning to understand why. Shining my light around, I saw there were old pieces of leather and ragged strips of wire, rope, and twine hanging from the ceiling's crossbeams. Crude wooden crosses assembled from broken sticks and small logs hung suspended from these, turning and swaying gently despite the lack of breeze down in the basement. I felt a presence behind me suddenly and spun around, the air turning ice cold. For a moment, I thought I saw a dark shadow shape similar to a person, but there was no one standing there. Every part of me wanted to get out of there, but I knew I had to make sure the basement was empty. I shone my flashlight into every corner and every hidden space, making sure it was unoccupied. Sure enough, it was. But I did find something. There was a black box in a stone alcove, surrounded by inscriptions carved directly into the foundations of the house. The strange shrine resembled something from a church or a temple, but it appeared darker somehow. Evil. A chill ran through my bones, which seemed to emanate from the stone. Unlit candles and strange black statues surrounded the box, sitting dead center in the focal piece of this creepy, unholy altar. I don't remember taking the box upstairs with me, but nonetheless I found myself back on the main level, holding it in my hands. It looked curious and ancient. The feeling of someone watching remained, accompanied by an odd chill which ran through my bones, almost like the temperature in the house had gone down by 10 degrees. There's nobody down there, I told Christine, who was waiting for me at the top of the stairs. But I found this weird box, just crosses hanging from the ceiling. Tray creepy. You need to get rid of that thing, she said, holding up her hands to cover her eyes from even looking at it. I hate it. There's something wrong with it. Really? What do you want me to do with it? I asked. It's just some old box, probably somebody's keepsakes. I don't care, just Put it outside. Send it away with the trash on pickup day. Just get rid of it. Christine never acted this way. She didn't believe in superstition or curses. She was a self-proclaimed atheist, in fact. But the way she was acting was enough to convince me she was serious, so I didn't argue. Okay, I'll put it outside, I said. I brought it out with me into the front yard and tried to decide where to put it. I settled on leaving it in the back of the moving truck.
To get that.
In the glow of the lights inside the box of the moving van, I took a moment to take a closer look at the box. It was ice cold to the touch, I realized. The surface of it was slick and black like polished marble. But when I took my hand away, it smudged off like charcoal. There were archaic symbols carved into it, and a lock held it shut at the front. I found myself trying to open it, but was unable to. Distantly, I heard something whispering to me, its voice insistent and raspy. But I dismissed that as just the wind and nothing more. Eventually, I gave up on the box's lock and went inside. My wife looked startled when I walked in the front door. What are you doing out there? I thought you'd gone to bed. You were out there with that creepy box for like 2 hours. No. I started to disagree with her, but then I looked at my watch and realized she was right. Unsure what to say, I told her I was tired and must have zoned out. I needed to get some sleep.
Onward.
Trudging up the stairs to the bedroom, I collapsed on the unmade mattress and drifted off into a deep slumber. As I slept, my dreams were filled with that dark feeling of being observed, as if eyes were watching me closely from the corner of my bedroom in the shadows. When I awoke, it was still dark outside. I looked around the pitch-black room, feeling uneasy, and saw unfamiliar shapes and shadows I didn't recognize. That sensation of being watched had returned tenfold, and I felt a presence observing me from the corner, where a man-shaped shadow stood. Running over to the door, I went to turn on the light switch. I flicked it to the on position, but the light didn't turn on, and the room remained stubbornly dark. My heart was pounding as I felt that presence staring at me in the room from the corner. I wanted more than anything to turn on the lights, but they wouldn't go on. For some reason, I found myself going back to bed instead of fleeing the room, terrified as I was. I found myself lying back down in bed, tucking myself back in under the covers, and staring at the thing in the corner as it watched me. That dark, unrecognizable shape in the corner of the room began to move towards me. A shadow-shaped person reaching out for me, coming for me. I tried to move, found myself paralyzed. I tried to scream, but couldn't. I woke up panting, covered in cold sweat, and realized I'd dreamt the whole thing. The shape in the corner of the room had revealed itself in the morning light, and I saw it was, in fact, a stack of boxes with coats draped at the top of it. It was barely sunrise outside, and Christine was in the bed next to me. She bolted upright, looking startled, and asked what had happened. I had a horrible dream. It felt so real. You know those waking nightmares when you feel like you're up and walking around after being asleep, and you realize you were out the whole time? My wife didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on something across the room. She was looking at the dresser, and her jaw was hanging down. What's that thing doing in here? I told you to get rid of it. You brought it up here and opened it instead? She was pointing at something, and I followed her gaze to see the black box from the basement was on the bureau. It was open, and I had no memory of doing that. I didn't do that. I definitely didn't open it, did I? You're telling me you don't remember bringing that box in here and opening it? No, it was locked. I tried. I couldn't get it open. Just get it out of here. I don't want to look at it anymore, okay? Bring it to the dump or something. Just get it out of the house and far away from here. I went over to the dresser and saw the open box was filled with strange items. A lock of hair, a charred piece of clothing, a cross, and other burnt items. There was a powerful odor coming from it as well, unlike anything I'd ever come across. The stench was unpleasant and burnt my nostrils as I drew closer. It's impossible. I know I didn't bring this in here. It's cursed or something. Just get it out of the house, please. My wife was more upset than I'd ever seen her, so I put on my clothes and took the box out to the car with me. I didn't know where the local dump was exactly, but I figured I would go look for it. As I neared the town, I saw an antique shop at the side of the road and pulled over on a whim. I wondered if the owner would be interested in taking the box off my hands, or if he could at least tell me what it was. The bell above the door rang as I entered, and a man came out from the back room, polishing a brass candelabra with a rag. "Morning," he said in a friendly voice. "How can I help you?" He stopped speaking abruptly when he saw what was in my hands. The candelabra fell to the floor with a loud clang, and he began to visibly shake as he raised his finger to point at the box. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. "Where did you find that thing?" "We just moved in up the road, my wife and I. It was in the basement of the old farmhouse up the street." I moved toward him with my hand held out to shake his hand and saw that my fingers were smudged black with the box's darkness. He backed away, slamming into the wall behind him and sending a framed photo crashing to the floor, the glass shattering loudly. "Don't touch me! Don't touch anything! Just get out! Get out and put that thing back where you found it! If you do anything else with it, you will never get your life back. You should have never taken it from its resting place. You should have never come here." I backed away from him, terrified even more than before, especially knowing now that others were aware of the dark powers this box contained. Whatever it was not meant to be moved. Its resting place was of extreme importance. Maybe that was why the house had been so cheap. It came with a cursed basement. The man began to throw things at me, shouting in a foreign language I didn't recognize, then speaking harshly in English, telling me to leave and never come back. He spoke in prayer-like incantations and made the sign of the cross over and over again. I stumbled out of my car and started the engine, driving back towards the farmhouse and wishing we'd never purchased the place. When I pulled up outside the farmhouse, I tried to decide what to say to my wife. How would I explain to her that the box couldn't be moved? Maybe if we just left it in the basement, the presence would leave us alone.
How are you?
I decided I would just try to sneak it in and put it back in the basement without her noticing. I would explain it to her later, or at least try to. The important thing now seemed to be to return it to its proper place before something really terrible happened. Noise in case Christine had gone back to sleep again upstairs. I began heading down into the darkness beneath the house. I was holding the box carefully in my hands like a live bomb, since I wasn't sure what would happen if I dropped it or did anything wrong. Each creaking stair made my heart hammer faster as I trod down towards the dirt floor of the basement. Finally, I set foot down there and looked around, seeing only shadows. The light from upstairs was dim, and it was the only source I had to see by. My phone was in my pocket, and I kept it there, thinking I would only be down there for a few moments. Walking across the blackened space towards the alcove which had housed the black box, I began to feel watched again. It was only then that I noticed that sensation had been gone for a while, as I drove to the antique store and back again. Whatever had been with the box watching me, it had not stayed inside after the thing had been opened. It had stayed in the house, with my wife. A loud bang came from the top of the stairs, and the entire basement went completely pitch black in an instant. I realized the door had slammed shut, and I figured Christine had closed it. Maybe she didn't realize I was home. I began to fumble for the cell phone in my pocket, needing a bit of light to feel safe down in this terrifying basement. Before I could grab it, something attacked me. The shrieking wail it made was inhuman and full of rage. It swiped at me with sharp claws in the darkness as I rolled and ducked away from it, trying to escape. I threw the box down to the floor, hoping to get away. As I got up, I hit my head on a dangling wooden cross and nearly got wrapped up in the twine which suspended it from the ceiling. Stumbling, I tried to find my way to the stairs, screaming for my wife to help me. She didn't answer. A moment later, the thing came at me again. It was fast, but thin, and just a bit weaker than me despite its anger. I managed to grab its wrists and push it up against the wall, then tripped it to the floor. I ran up the stairs, stumbling on the steps and scraping my shins, bloodying them badly. Just as I reached the top, the thing came at me again, relentless, screaming ancient curses with spittle flying in my face. It swiped at my eyes and got one of them, blinding me. The door was just behind me, so I flung it open and shoved the thing away from me. butting in through the open door I saw would have been attacking me. My wife tumbled down the steps, cracking her head against the wall on the way down and falling lifeless into the dirt floor of the basement below. I took a few shaky steps down the stairs, looking to confirm if my eyes had deceived me, but they had not. The thing in the box had stayed behind when I left and had possessed my wife, driving her down into the darkness and glare, where it felt most at home. As I stood there staring at her lifeless body, I saw her begin to twitch. Her fingers began to drum up and down, and her head began to rock and make a loud smacking noise as her forehead impacted the basement floor again and again, hard. Christine? I called down the stairs. Stop, please. She continued with self-destructive behavior, smashing her skull hard against the dirt floor. I began to take a shaky step down to stop her, but then hesitated. That thing was still inside of her, and it wasn't safe. Yet I couldn't let her just keep hurting herself like that. The sound repeated again and again as I screamed for her to stop, but she wouldn't. I wouldn't go down there again. And eventually the thing inside of her realized that. She said in a droning, knee-high voice, "No." I just stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. My wife appeared to have broken a few limbs during her fall, but that didn't stop her from moving quickly. Sickening sounds of bone crunching could be heard from the top of the stairs as she got to her feet. Her one ankle failing so that she rested her weight on the splintered nub of her tibia rather than on her foot. Whatever was inside of her felt no pain. It looked agonizing to me. She began to shuffle up the wooden stairs without warning, moving faster than I thought possible, crab-like and inhuman on four legs. It looked like she wouldn't be able to make it on her fractured bones, and yet she moved like a relentless insect, her other limbs making up for the deficits of her lost one. Using her arms like additional legs, she began to crawl towards me up the stairs, her fingernails digging into the splintered wooden stairs and breaking off as she raced faster and faster, gaining momentum. I realized at the last second that I'd been paralyzed with terror and threw the door shut, just as she slammed into it with a shuddering bang that rattled the upstairs windows in their frames. There was no lock on the door, and I could do nothing but hold it closed with all the weight of my body. She wouldn't relent for a second, turning the doorknob constantly, pressing with all of her strength against the door, as I grit my teeth and fought against her weight. I'm sitting here still, with my back pressed up against the door, my feet wedged against the opposing wall with all the force I can muster. When I finish typing this out, I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll try the police and see what they say. My biggest concern is that they'll want to let her out. She'll probably pretend to be normal when they arrive. She'll pretend I'm insane, that I attacked her. But I know that's not her. It's the thing from the basement, the thing from the black box. Whatever it is, she can't be allowed to bring it back to the surface. It's locked down in that basement for a reason. That's where it needs to stay. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Sewall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Blue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Saren Ray, Angela Donovan, Larian50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Swivey, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart, Sherman Davis, Bryce Sheldon, Susan McClendon, Elise Batiste, Lisa and the Cult Jam, Open Circuit, Fabula Boar, Raymond Jaggers, That Darn Fox, Raison Detra, Kai Gaming 99, Windy Burns, The Windigo, Michael Squishy Park, The Gemstar, Vault 77 Citizen. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos, content, and a Discord channel. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. It really does help a lot. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.
Giddy up.
There, the better gave me 6. Yeah, I got over 6. Okay.
Good thing that we have this whole
Go
planting the
in
seed process a lot more enjoyable.
Nice hole here.
My house needs repairs.
Yes, I'm getting to it. wherever it is.
Summer, the only time when you're not sure if you're sweating from the heat or from hard work.
When I was about 6 years old, I followed a red bird into the woods. I didn't think much about it. It just made a funny sound and I wanted to look at it. So I wandered off. My mother had fallen asleep on her sunbed after toting about in the garden. She was usually very attentive. Once the bird flew away, I tried to turn back, only to realize I'd wandered off the trail, and I had no idea where I was. It was the first time I truly feared for my life. The forests of West Virginia can be so dense that they eat your screams. No one could hear me calling for help, and I couldn't hear my panicked mother looking for me. I ended up moving further and further into the forest. I went the wrong way. The sky slowly turned dark as the hours passed, and I found myself following a river. I was thirsty. It eventually got so dark that I couldn't see my own feet. At some point, I put my foot down wrong and twisted my ankle. It just broke me. I couldn't straighten my leg out or put any weight on it. I just sat there by the river, completely devastated. I cried my eyes out, screaming for help, but no one came. Just me and the dark. And the dark was ready to eat me alive. In the darkest hours of the night, as the fear had reached into the back of my heart, I just sat there, shivering. It was as if the panic had subsided into a sort of revelation. I imagined death waiting for me at the other side of the river. I knew it was there. I never saw it, but I painted a picture of it in my mind. I figured it had a really long arm with a single painted nail. If I looked at it or talked to it, that arm would grow longer. But it wanted me to look. It wanted me to know it was there. "Look at me," it whispered. "Look at me, little boy." Sometime during the night, I passed out. They found me by the river just before sunrise. And although my leg healed, my mind didn't. And from that day forward, I've always had the sense that something lurks in the dark, just out of sight. Something that wants me to look, to find it, to reach me. Ever since, I've had an anxious relationship to the dark. Some would call it nyctophobia, a sort of fear of the unseen. I've always held that gnawing feeling of something waiting on the other side of that river, just out of reach. But one misstep and it would get me. Even as an adult, I still get that sense of dread, an all-encompassing panic. The sense that you're not getting enough oxygen despite hyperventilating. Blood rushing to your head so fast it starts ringing in your ears. And then and there, in my most vulnerable moments, I can still hear it. "Look at me, look at me." Over the years, I've been to various therapists. I've had treatment. And honestly, just being open about my fears has helped tremendously. I've faced my fears time and time again and channeled them into creative outlets. That's how I eventually became a screenwriter. I work my fingers to the bone. Sometimes out of ambition, but most most often just to distract myself from that all-consuming darkness that sneaks up on me late at night. I moved to the West Coast in 2011. An internship led me to a position as an uncredited assistant screenwriter on a popular sitcom. I can't name any names, but I'm sure there were quite a few nerds enjoying our 4th season. I got my first job at a movie set in 2016. I mostly worked on last-minute edits and consultation, but it was the first time I saw my name on the silver screen. I'm sure some of you horror fans out there enjoyed it. And to those of you who gained a lifelong fear of dolls, I'm sorry. I worked several straight projects until 2018, when I met a very influential man. Let's call him Patrick, or Pat for short. Pat and I met up at the wrap-up party of another project we got a bit too. I ended up mentioning my trauma. It just sort of slipped out. I mentioned my sprained leg and sitting there at the bank of the river. I mentioned the presence in the dark, the long arm growing longer the more I tried to see it. What's it called? Pat asked, flabbergasted. And in that moment, I pitched my first screen. Pat fast-tracked the whole thing. He was aching for producer's credit, and he genuinely loved the imagery of the look of me. The creature lurking in the dark with an arm growing taller the more he paid attention to it. He thought it was absolutely chilling, and he kept hyping me up about it several times a week. I had a rough draft ready in 2 weeks. I tried to channel my childhood fears into a cohesive story, but instead of a kid stuck by the river, it was more of a classic horror setup. A group of young adults who got lost in the forests of West Virginia, being relentlessly hunted by this primal force. That first draft was rough, but I got a good outline. I worked with 2 other writers for the second draft. Kellen, who mostly worked crime drama, and Morgan. She was a comedy writer who wanted to break into a new genre. There was a lot of late-night rewrites. Morgan was also an amazing concept artist, who brought each piece of our story to life. I remember one night as we worked on the second draft, Kellen was rambling on and on about what the look of me represented. It's too simple, he sighed. It can't just be death. We're not making a Jason Voorhees. It's something new. It means something. I think it's trauma, said Morgan. Like how it gets worse the more you poke at it, the more you look at it. It's painful. What the hell kind of a message is that? Kellen scoffed. Are we telling people not to confront their fears? No, we're telling them not to get goaded into it. To do it on your own terms, you know? It felt like a good and bad conscience chattering in my ears. But at the end of the day, it was my script, and it came down to my decision. Kellen wanted to paint the picture of a threat, something symbolic. Morgan wanted to send a message, using the look of me as a tool. Neither of them was getting the point. There's nothing to it, I finally said. It is not a message. It's not a symbol.
Move on.
It's there, and it hunts. It's just like a bear or a shark. So we're just making a monster movie? Scoffed Kellen. Jaws 4. Deep Forest Boogaloo. There was a Jaws 4, actually, smiled Morgan. It was called The Revenge. Oh, please. They argued back and forth. They argued about how bad the script could get if we continued down this path.
How can I help you?
They argued about the cliches we were wandering headfirst into. And it dawned on me they were just scared of the dark. They didn't have control. I did. I got it from here, I said. Take the night off. So they did. They were still arguing in the hallway on their way out. Moments later, Kellen turned back. He leaned in and gave me a final look. You know you have to show it, right? He said.
Why
No
they
matter what, we
got
can't just
pops
have it
upside
hidden
down
in the
on
dark.
the thing?
We have to show it. That's where my writing stopped. No matter how I twisted and turned it, I couldn't picture the look of me. All I saw was this long arm reaching towards me, coming out of the dark. A woman's hand with a single painted nail. But the more I thought about it, the more my anxiety spiked. I knew I could see it in my mind if I wanted to. I could. But looking at it too closely, in any way, would give it the power to reach me. My mind wouldn't let me see it. My reptile brain was reaching through my anxiety to rattle me into looking the other way, to turn my mind away from the page. Couldn't describe it. All I got was that long arm. I could have sworn I felt it brushing against the back of my neck. The second draft was stalled for a couple of weeks. Pat was getting impatient. He called me into the office one rainy Wednesday afternoon to have a serious conversation about the rewrite. When I got there, I was ambushed by a whole gaggle of writers, an entire team. A room full of people who'd all been briefed. They all had printed out copies of the first draft, and both Morgan and Kellen had told them about the issue with the rewrite. Pat wasn't playing around. He wanted this done. I barely got a word out before we were ushered into our seats and pushed into finishing the draft. There were about a dozen of us. Some were pretty big industry names, called in to give some pedigree to the script. One of them had worked on prosthetics for a big zombie show, and he came out swinging. "Let's just expand on what we got," he suggested. "Instead of a long arm, why not several, like just all arms?" "Yeah," someone chimed in. "It saves them, the arms, I mean." "Oh, it adds to itself," someone laughed. "A literal growing fear." "Ringu meets the Blob. Love it. Love it." They were all talking over me, through me, past me. They didn't know any better, and as a collective, they all looked at the look of me. Not literally, of course, but figuratively. They were bringing it into focus. And even there, in the bright lights of that film studio meeting room, I could feel that darkness coming over me. My breath growing shallow. My vision turning into a pin. Back in my mind, I heard it. "Look at me, little boy." I ran out of the office, locked myself in the bathroom, puked my guts out. I screamed into the toilet bowl, waiting for the panic to stop. I could feel that long arm reaching for me. And the more I thought about it, the closer it got. "Look at me," it hissed, its voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. "Look at me." I didn't return to that meeting. I got in my car and went straight home to take my backup anxiety meds. I hadn't used them in a while. I fell face first into the bed and collapsed into a nightmarish mid-afternoon nap. Later that day, I poured myself a bath and a glass of red wine, non-alcoholic. Even brought out some bubbles. I figured I'd stay in for the rest of the day and get takeout. Just a few minutes into the bath, my phone started buzzing. Turns out Pat had run out of patience. They'd finished the second draft, and they were going ahead with it, with or without me. I was invited to add to it, but they weren't going to budge on what the consultants had come up with. I skimmed it. There it was. They had been poking at the look of me for hours. There was concept art, vivid descriptions, and even a storyboard sketch. The look of me. 100 arms from 100 victims. An eldritch Medusa. Ringu meets the Blob. They had comparisons, charts, mood boards. One of them already had a casting suggestion for the voiceover. Then, the power went out. With a snap from the ceiling light, I was enveloped in complete darkness. In a heartbeat, I went from a screenwriter back to a little boy, lost and alone in the dark. I imagined myself submerged in that forest river. I scrambled to get out. I kept slipping as I felt the bathtub give way for river stones. I could feel them. I could smell the algae. "Look at me, little boy," the darkness hissed. "They gave me a body. They look, little boy. You made them look at me. And now I can reach much, much further." A warmth against my cheek as something leaned in. Sticky lips parting, like slowly pulling off a band-aid. It was right there in the dark. "Thank you." As the lights came back on, I felt my heart skip a beat. Every square inch, every bathroom tile, every towel and shampoo bottle. It was was all covered in handprints. And for the first time since I was 6 years old, I screamed like my life depended on it. Like a part of me was still stuck in those woods, hoping for my mother to find me. Over the next few days, my fear of the dark kicked into overdrive. Every time I stepped out of the light, I heard it. Little remarks, snickers, and laughter. Just closing my eyes was all it took for the sound of tapping fingers to creep closer. I couldn't help but to imagine it. It was no longer just an arm in the dark. It was this amalgamation. It poured out of every dark corner of every room. It had so many more things to say, and its arms were so much longer. And no matter how many lights were on, and no matter how much light I let in from the windows, I could still sense it. Out of every unseen corner, out of every closed door, it was there. It wanted me to look. I was getting regular updates. They were on a third draft. Kellen and Morgan had completely taken over the writing, and I was turning more into a consultant. The project was running away from me. More concept art, more lines, more dialogue. They were looking at it. I had pointed it out to them, and now they were all looking. I was in a feverish panic. I could feel it growing stronger, bigger, more assertive. It was no longer just something lurking in the back of my mind. It was reaching across the river. And at every turn, at every corner, there it was. Look at me. I'll be honest, some of those days are a blur. I remember a rainy evening in the middle of the week. I was so sleep-deprived, exhausted, and mentally torn. I don't even remember going to see Morgan. I just had this drive to stop her from looking too closely. I had to stop her from whatever was going to happen if she looked for too long. I had to save her. The moment I put my hand to her door, it opened. Morgan looked at me with sleepless eyes, her hands shaking. For a moment, the two of us just looked at one another. I thought you were sick, she said. They said you were. You don't look too great yourself, I said, forcing a chuckle. Every light in her apartment was on. Even her TV, a flashlight, and her laptop. The curtains had been torn down and spread across the floor. It might have been evening outside, but her place was bright as day. I could put two and two together, but it felt strange saying it out loud. You've seen it. You've looked, I mean. Morgan nodded, her head shaking up and down like a bobblehead. The poor thing was exhausted. It's real, she stammered. How can it be real? She invited me in. I sat down on her sofa on top of a flowery curtain. Morgan's hands were shaking so bad I could hear the spoon in her cup of tea rattle back and forth. Started a few days ago, she said. It never stops. The more I try not to think about it, the more real it gets. It wants you to look, I said. It wants...
How?
You know, this
How the
thing.
fuck? Where are my fish going? Who is taking my fish?
Years, and now it's clawing its way out. That's, yeah,
I
something like
looked,
that.
and they are not in the eating
Stop,
section.
she asked.
But they keep disappearing.
Do we kill you?
Who is taking the
She
fish?
sat down next to me, holding her cup tight with both of her hands. I don't think so.
Kitchen?
It's already out there.
It would be roasted fish meat, not...
Look at it. It's done. It's happening.
This isn't possible.
And the thought hit me. What the hell would happen once an audience of thousands, or tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands
I
watched
have
it?
roasted meat
How long would it
from
grow
meat
just
one.
from the test screen?
Scrambled eggs.
How far across the river?
Who the hell is taking the fish? There's no way.
A cold chill went up my spine.
No way.
Maybe this was the
Is
plan.
that supposed to be disappearing?
Maybe this was what it wanted. Maybe it pushed me towards writing to begin with. Maybe it lived in me, putting me on a path to birth it on the world stage. I felt sick. I can't let this happen, I said. If we shoot anything, a promo, a trailer, anything.
Oh my.
The goddamn casting or there's a
There's
leak.
no way my fish is gone.
Morgan covered her mouth, her eyes going wide. Do you think?
I was just thinking about getting it. I saw it and now it's gone.
This mind creature, if brought to the public, would be unstoppable. We got our coats and got out of the apartment. We had to see Pat. Maybe he was experiencing something similar. Morgan fumbled for her keys and almost stumbled over her own feet. I could hear her swearing with frustration. The moment we got out of her apartment, it was as if time stood still. Morgan was right behind me, but something happened. There was the strange ammonia smell in the air.
Gone.
I slowly turned around, holding my breath. I hadn't thought about it, but the hallway light outside her apartment was broken. And for a moment, we were standing in darkness. One by one, the lights in her apartment went out, twinkling on and off like dying stars. A pair of pale fingers dug through her hair. A single painted fingernail poked out from behind her ear.
I could eat a horse.
So many fingers. Morgan gasped. We looked at one another breathlessly. It could reach all the way across. It could reach across the river. In a heartbeat, the door slammed shut. There was a visceral tearing and the sound of something rolling across the floor. And outside, the lights were starting to die. Look at me, little boy, the dark said. Look at me. Long, pale arms crawled out of every corner, reaching for me. It wasn't even dark yet. It didn't care. It laughed. I refused to get trapped in the elevator, so I ran down the stairs, feeling the sole of my boots trample curious fingers with every corner I rounded. I could feel them nipping at my clothes, grasping for my neck. I burst through the exit to street level, knocking over a middle-aged couple as I scrambled towards my car. I didn't even hear their insults. All I heard was my heartbeat, and that little voice growing louder every time I left the safety of the streetlights. I drove past red lights, broke every speed limit, and went down the wrong end of a one-way street. I was in a frenzy and ended up frantically knocking on Pat's front door. I tried to compose myself, but there was no use. My eyes were wild, and I couldn't stop my legs from shaking. My lips quivered like I was hypothermic. Pat was having a small party, just like the one I'd first met him at. He was about to invite me in, but he stopped himself. Clearly, I wasn't well. We gotta stop this, Pat, I said. We gotta stop production. What are you talking about? He smiled. There's no reason to... No, you're not hearing me. This is not a debate. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna let you talk to me like... I heard it. That snickering, pleading little voice, asking me to turn around, to look into the dark of the night. Look at me. I snapped. I shoved the door open and forced my way inside. I picked up a small wine glass from a nearby table, stomped into the living room, and tapped it with my phone for attention. It could be 1,000 times worse. 10,000. 100,000. No. I barely even noticed the glass breaking and everyone staring. At least 36 industry professionals. People I'd looked up to my entire professional career. Hell, one of them was an A-lister. Hi, I stammered. We're canceling all production of the Look at Me. There was a murmur in the crowd. Little smirks and pitying smiles. It's happening, I said. It's done, it's gone. You don't know what you're talking about, groaned Pat. Calling the police. Do whatever you want, but if I see a single goddamn still from that production, burning the goddamn studio to the ground. You gotta be. I grabbed Pat by the collar and pushed him up against the wall, rattling his wine glasses. I'm burning the goddamn studio to the ground. Career suicide. Complete, absolute career suicide. I collapsed back into my car, still holding the broken wine glass. I turned on the dome lights to drown out the darkness, but it didn't work. I flicked it a couple times, but nothing happened. A pale hand pushed down on my door lock. Click. Don't look at me. A voice whispered from the back seat, and a cold hand stroked my cheek. I thought back on that night from so many years ago. That absolute terror, that certainty of death. Just like then, there was this moment where fear gave way to revelation. Of course. You can't kill me, I said. I'm the only one who's really looked. I'm the only one giving you this reach. Cold fingers curled around my neck. That's it, isn't it? Isn't it? It's because of me. Otherwise, you would have killed me. You would have stopped me from going in there. There was no response, just a tightening grip. Long nails brushing my hair, grabbing at it. Without me, without that show, there's no one to look. Drawings will be tossed, the script forgotten. Just be you and me. If I'm gone, there's just you. And you're nothing. You are literally nothing. You never were anything, but nothing. And I turned around to look at me. And all I saw was a pale white hand retreating into the dark. Now it's been a while. I'm no longer under a studio NDA, but I'm not taking any chances. No charges were pressed. No production came to pass. It was just easier to shut it down and move on. You might have heard about Morgan. The details were graphic. And no, of course that's not her real name. They said she had some kind of episodes, and the results were tragic. How you can do something like she did to her own head during an episode they conveniently left out. But I know. I'll always know. Some things out there defy our explanations, our rationale. Some things aren't a message or a monster or a theme, it just is. It exists because we make it exist. It wants to be seen. To me, I don't know where the look of me came from. Maybe it came from me. Maybe it is me. Or maybe it was just something that found me in the dark and decided to stick around. But now I know that as much as I will be stuck with it for the rest of my life, at least that thing is equally stuck with me. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark Murray, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Swall, Cheryl James, Sticker Sticker, Teddy Dog, Blue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Darren Ray, Angela Donovan, Larry and 50, Kevin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Johnny Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Harry Harkinen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart, Sherman Davis, Bryce Shelton, Susan McLennan, Elise Batiste, Lisa and the Cult Jane, Open Circuit, Fabulabor, Raymond Jaggers, That Darn Fox, Raison Detra, Kai Gaming 99, Windy Burn, The Windigo, Michael Squishy Park, The Gemstar, Vault 77 Citizen, Hobby Dan, and Clovis Wolf. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos, content, and a Discord channel. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.
I'd eat something. I feel famished.
I only noticed the notification because I had taken my phone off vibrate. I'm someone who detests the constant dinging and chiming of a modern smartphone. The only reason that I even bought one is because my job required me to upgrade my flip phone. And so, to try and keep as much of the digital noise out of my daily life, I always have it set to vibrate at most, and usually silent. But I was expecting a call from my doctor's office to schedule my yearly physical. So, to make sure that I wouldn't miss it, I had set my notification volume to full blast while I cleaned up around the apartment. When the annoying ding-ding smashed through the relaxed atmosphere provided by the playful vocals of Richard Bardot coming from the record player, despite being only halfway done, I walked over and picked up the phone from the counter. If nothing else, it would be a brief distraction from the monotony. When I saw that it was a Facebook notification from one of my old friends that I hadn't spoken to in a while, I smiled slightly. Well, what do you know? I tapped it, opening the app and fully expecting to see a comment on my wall about how we needed to catch up soon. But instead, I came across the last thing that I expected to see. The rest in began ringing and making me jump slightly. After a second's hesitation, I answered it, and I was greeted by the cheerful and friendly voice of my doctor's assistant. Normalcy returned, and shifting into professional mode, I quickly set a date and time for the week after next to see him before hanging up. Pulling the phone away from my ear, I stared at the screen and the strange pose. And then the realization hit me and I began to laugh. Brett, you utter idiot. My friend was always one to play off color and dumb jokes on me. Pulling a stunt like this would be right up his alley. It would confuse the hell out of everyone else, but he would know that I would eventually get it and laugh about it together. Chuckling, I opened Messenger and quickly typed out a direct reply. And a very funny weirdo. That's a new one, I'll give you that. Congratulations on confusing the heck out of me with that post. You're gonna either completely baffle everyone else or make me have to reassure everybody on my friends list by the end of the day. I'm getting you back for this. Satisfied and imagining him laughing his butt off.
There's no buckets of water?
I returned my phone to silent and went about finishing up my cleaning.
Wait a minute, I also forbid them from eating buckets of water.
To pick up a few things from the store and pharmacy. I locked my door,
Food
got my
items.
aging Crown Vic, and I took off. The unusually warm spring weather was nice enough that I was able to roll down my windows. And I waved at one of my neighbors mowing his lawn, receiving a smile and a wave in return. Merging with traffic, I glanced slightly nervously down
I
at the
put them in
dash,
alphabetical
praying that I
order?
wouldn't see any warning lights. I really need to get into the mechanic as soon as I have the money anyways. The 30-year-old sedan was on the ragged edge of drivability, to the point that I didn't dare drive it out of town.
Bucket of milk. Bucket
I
of
was
sour
terrified
milk.
the moment that I got off the bridge and a mile or two down the isolated coastal highway that connects home to the outside world, that I would end up stranded. And making less than $12,000 a year means that money needs to go more to rent, lights and food than car repairs. But she had served me well so far. better than the modern trucks and cars that my neighbors were dumb enough to buy every few years. Even still, I was at least thankful that
No, you're
it
not
was the only
eating
thing
raw.
that seemed to change here.
What happened to
The
the...
rest of the isolated Oregon town was perpetually frozen in time. The houses all remained the same. The same stores lined the streets. And the same
Yes,
faces that I
yes.
had grown used to seeing were always where I had hoped they would be. And picking up my medication and a frozen pizza for dinner, I window shopped for a little while, seeing the happy faces of teenagers,
What's going on
adults,
with
and
the
elderly
music?
couples alike, enjoying the 64-degree weather. The positivity was infectious, and I couldn't help but stay around them for a bit, eventually leaving with a smile on my face that remained as I drove back home and shoved the pizza into the oven. It wasn't until close to 8, after I watched a movie, that Brett's prank post had resurfaced in my mind. Chuckling again, I picked up my phone from the coffee table and I flicked on the screen. Just as I thought, there were message and notifications from him waiting for me. I grinned, tabbing them as I prepared to read an excessive amount of LOLs and gloating about how he had got me for a minute. But instead, I found myself reading a deluge of short, increasingly hostile messages. Who the hell is this? I said, who the hell is this? Is this one of Dalton's family? Answer me. All the good vibes from the day deflated like a child's abandoned party balloon as I continued to scroll down. Oh, you son of a... You hacked my friend's account. What's wrong with you? Get a life and don't ever message me again. What in the world? I whispered, my eyebrows furrowing in confusion. What is up with him? This wasn't like him at all. Something had to be up. Quickly, I typed out a message to him, seeing the green online bubble next to his name. Dude, what the hell? Nobody's hacked my account. Take a chill pill. Is everything alright? I didn't even have time to close out of the app before I saw that it had been read. The 3 bubbles appeared as showing he was typing a reply. A moment later it appeared and I felt my confusion spike to new levels. Oh, get lost, you loser. Don't try and pretend that you're him. Quickly I replied, dude, I promise it's me. Are you at home? I'll video call you to prove it. The reply was almost instantaneous. I said, get lost. The all-caps message made me recoil as if I had been physically slapped. And all the time that I had known Brett, he had never acted like this towards me. Now he was treating me like I was either a complete stranger or the punchline to the cruelest joke that he had ever played. Is he drunk? Deciding that I would try and get one of our other friends to check on him to make sure that he was okay. I found my chat with Eva, noting with a small pang of guilt that it had been months since I had messaged him
Anyway, where did my son get to so quickly?
I know I'm not the fondest of social media, but I really need to keep up contact with my friends
It's on the
outside of
yellow.
town. That's how you drift apart. Deciding that I wanted to do something other than type,
Only 2.
I quickly left
And
her a voice
still
message.
stinking sickle at age 2.
Eva, hey, look, I'm
Personality
really
dare
sorry that I
double.
haven't hit you up in, oh god, 5 months now. You know me, I get busy out in the real world, and I forget to even check my message. I left him and he decided to get drunk or something, but this just isn't like him. I'll get into the details later. Thanks, and again, we'll talk soon.
Oh, bags. I ran out of bags.
Releasing the button and making sure that it's sent, I looked again at the screaming profanity that almost seemed to leap off the screen. Involuntarily, I shuddered at it and quickly exited the app, wanting to let the real, sane world reassert itself. Sighing, I turned and saw the orange glow of the sun framed in my kitchen window. Standing up and walking to it, I craned my neck and looked towards the estuary and Pacific beyond. The sky almost seemed the color of my favorite cocktail, with its orange and reddish hues, and I found myself smiling slightly at it. That's beautiful. I should honestly get a picture of that. Pulling on a flannel shirt over my bare chest, I stepped outside onto the balcony facing the water and I raised my phone. I snapped one, and then seeing it was quickly beginning to slip away, I impulsively switched it to selfie mode, and I positioned myself in front of it. I gave it my usual half smile before watching the sun disappear on the horizon. Feeling the call of the Sandman to my bed, I took a moment to open Facebook back up, uploading both pictures and updating my profile picture with the selfie. At least now it isn't showing that horrible haircut that I had in 2019. Walking back inside, I tossed the phone onto the couch and walked into the bedroom, changing into a pair of pajama bottoms and climbing into bed. I wound up and set the alarm on my clock. Then for a few minutes, I stared up at the ceiling, watching the shape of the bare tree branches outside shift around in the wind. As they shifted in one direction, the branches seemed to transform into skeletal hands, reaching out across the ceiling. Normally it wouldn't have bothered me, but after the weird interaction with Brad, which despite my slightly better mood was still battering around in my head like a pinball, I couldn't help but shiver at them. I turned away on my side, facing the wall and slowly allowing my eyes to close, and feeling the waking world rapidly fall away from me. The next morning, I quickly dressed and got ready to head off to my shift at the lumberyard. I grabbed my phone on my way out the door, but I didn't even bother to look at it. I would deal with everything on my lunch break. I waved to Mr. Dieter as I passed by the hardware store, smiling at the elderly man stopped wheeling the open sign out onto the sidewalk to beam and return the gesture. The first few hours of my shift passed by uneventfully. Aside from a moment of pure panic, when my boss had selected one of us to drive to the next town to pick up the order sheet for this week's delivery, I had often been deferred due to the condition of my car. But Travis had warned me lately that he couldn't do so much longer, as it wasn't fair to the others. Eventually I would have to do it. Internally, and admittedly slightly bitter, I snorted as he turned his back to me. How about you do it for a change like you're actually supposed to, and grab a frickin' salad next time before you go Gandolfini on us all. Thankfully this time around I went to Carl, and so I was able to return to my job of operating the forklift, moving wood around the yard for the next truck, before the 2 p.m. whistle signaled our lunch break. Retrieving the sandwich and the soda from my car that I had bought at Subway that morning, I settled in one of the empty break rooms and I began to eat. As I did, the thought of yesterday entered my mind, and I decided that while I had some time and privacy, I would check to see if either Eva had replied to me or Brad had come to his senses. Taking a sip of Coke, I fished it out of my pocket and I turned on the screen. To my immense relief, I saw that I had a message waiting from Eva, and I tapped on it, opening up the chat. I saw that she had done the same thing that I had and sent me a voice note, one about a minute or so long. I quickly popped a few chips into my mouth, chewing as I imagined what she would tell me. I decided to get it over with, and I tapped for it to begin playing. You disgusting lowlife. My head snapped up as Eva's voice, one that I had never heard speak to anyone with harsher than a soft reproach, hissed with barely contained venom through the speaker. You You utter piece of crap. How dare you use the voice of somebody that I love this way? How dare you use that disgusting deepfake stuff to mimic it, to post a photo of him? Do you have any idea what kind of fresh wounds you're tearing open? Do you know what it's doing to his friends? To me? My eyes widened as a mixture of shock and utter disbelief flooded my system. Brett was one thing. While it was screwed up, I could explain him as either having gone too far with a bad joke, or taking pain out on somebody due to a breakup. But Eva, she was the last person that I would have ever expected this from. And more to the point, the venom in her voice, it wasn't fabricated. It was genuine. Every word she hissed out felt like a knife to my heart.
How can I help you?
As I recalled growing up back in New Hampshire together, going to school together and only ever seeing her smile at me. Duncan, another one of our friends, had whispered to me one night that she secretly had a crush on me. That I could tell over the years and never went away. But I didn't want to ruin our friendship, and so I never made a move. The woman that I was hearing swear and berate me seemed like a different woman entirely. As she continued, "Don't you ever message me again. Don't you try voice calling me or nothing. Brett warned me about you when I messaged him earlier. We're gonna make sure you can't do this to any of his friends again." Her voice seemed to gather even more venom in it as her tone raised to almost a shout. Normally, I wouldn't say something as messed up as I'm about to, but in this case, I'll make an exception for a piece of crap like you. Go drink Drano, you worthless excuse for a human. Get lost and stop treating the memory of a dead friend like it's your personal toy. The voice note ended, leaving me with only the sound of the ventilation system for company. And my lunch lay forgotten on the table. All I could do was stare straight ahead at the wall, at the small, rectangular window near the ceiling as Eva's final sentence kept replaying in my mind. Stop treating the memory of a dead friend like it's your personal toy. Dead friend. A chill ran up my spine as the only words I could think came to me, barely coming out in a whisper. What is going on? I barely managed to get through the rest of my shift without internally losing it. The two words kept burning a hole into the back of my consciousness, no matter how hard I tried to push them away.
How can I help you?
At one point I paused and looked down at my arm, and unable to keep the feeling of insects from crawling under my skin at bay, I reached out and I pinched the skin. After a moment I felt pain, letting go to see 2 red marks from my fingernails. I shook my head. I don't know what the hell is happening, but I know that I'm not dead. Dead people can't feel pain. Even still, fueled by all the horror movies that I had grown up watching, the small but potent bit of doubt and, as much as I wanted to ignore it, dread, it kept eating away at me. It remained there as my shift ended, and I climbed into my car to drive home. I decided to stop at the small grocery store a block or so away from my apartment.
See you soon.
To again grab a pre-made meal for dinner. Obviously, I didn't feel like cooking anything tonight. As I got out of my car and I walked into the store, I found myself watching everyone I went past far more closely than I ever had before. I looked to see if any of them would seemingly not notice me, or worse, would walk right through me. But as I grabbed a basket and moved first to the freezers, then the alcohol section to grab a much-needed bottle of watermelon margarita, everyone I saw moved out of my way as I walked towards them. Many of them turned their faces up to make sure that they didn't run into me, and our eyes would often meet. Seeing the recognition in their eyes as I heard the soft sound of the ancient music playing over the speakers helped quickly relieve a good portion of the tension that had coiled around my inside. but it didn't completely erase the underlying feeling of dread that had followed me from the lumberyard like a specter. As I approached the cash registers, I noticed that one of my local friends, a tall, dark-haired dude wearing glasses, was standing weighed in one aisle that had no customers. Moving quickly to it, I called out a greeting. "Hey, Conrad, you open?" He looked up, and after a second, he smiled, waving me over. Hey, Dalton. Yep, I'm open. Come on over, buddy." Setting the basket down, I removed the fajita chicken stir-fry and bottle of margarita, and I placed them on the belt, handing him the basket. "So, how have you been? We've been on different schedules recently. Haven't seen you working again till now." He chuckled. "Yeah, I could say the same about you. Yeah, management has us on a new rotation. I've only just got back my regular shift recently. What about you? How was your day?" I grimaced slightly at having to remember the events of the last 2 days, but I answered honestly. "It's been a bit of a weird day, to say the least. Hopefully tomorrow will be better." I didn't go into details, especially with the other customers and cashier less than 15 feet away. He nodded sympathetically and then gestured to my items. "Yeah, I feel that. You want a bag for this?" I nodded, and then as he slid the dinner and drink into a plastic bag, an almost overwhelming need to ask him something flooded into me.
How are you?
"Hey, can I ask you what may seem like a bit of a weird question, man?" He stopped mid-action as he was turning back to the computer, tilting his head slightly at me with a curious expression. After a moment, he shrugged. "Shoot," he said. I took a deep breath, feeling both foolish and afraid of what I had to vocalize. I'm not dead, am I?" The question came out with a small shake to my voice. I could tell that he was not prepared for the question. He pulled back slightly, his eyes blinking rapidly behind his glasses, as if he were a computer being fed new information. A look that personified the phrase, "What in the hell?" crossed his features. Finally, after a moment, and a glance towards the back of the store where the manager's office was, he leaned over the counter and lightly smacked my shoulder before answering. "You seem perfectly alive and solid to me, unless you're a zombie." His joke did it. I couldn't help but laugh as I felt the last wisps of whispering dread and tension escape out of the open sliding doors into the night. Unable to resist, I raised my arms out in front of me and moaned like I was in a George Romero flick. "Brains," I muttered, causing him to snort. "Well, let's Return of the Living Dead, not Night of the Living Dead, you dolt," he chided. Shrugging my shoulders and grinning, I gestured to him. "And you seem perfectly alive as well." He mirrored my shrug as he looked back at the computer. "Hey, as far as I know, I'm fine. I'm better than that guy who got nailed on the side of the road a few months ago, though. Poor guy didn't even see the logging truck in the rain. Anyways, that'll be 1875. I pulled out my wallet, only half focused as I fumbled in it for a 20. Conrad's words had piqued my interest, as morbid as it was. As somebody got splattered around here. I never caught anything about it on the news or the radio. You know if it was a local or somebody passing through?" At my question, he seemed to freeze in front of the register, his finger poised to open the till. After a moment, he laughed. "Oh, damn it all, hell, man. I had it on the tip of my tongue, but it slipped my mind. I don't know, but I hate when that happens." The register let out a ding as it shot open, and he began to rummage in it for my change. I shrugged and slapped the counter. No, it's all good, man. Same thing happens to me more than I care to admit. He laughed, seeming to relax himself as he handed me my change and receipt, nodding gratefully at me. I picked up my bag and was about to turn away when something caught my eye. Hey dude, when did you get that scar on your neck? Conrad froze. For more than a few moments, he simply stared at me, a slightly odd, indescribable expression splashing on his face. I couldn't understand why, but seeing it as he slowly raised a hand to the side of his neck, his fingers tracing over the moon-shaped scar caused me to take a step back. He blinked a few times, his eyes seeming to glaze over, and then he snorted and chuckled, snapping back to the present. Oh, yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention to you. A couple of months ago during the day, we had one of those homeless junkies run up in here and try and rob the place. I was on, and unfortunately for me, I was also the only cashier on at the time. He winced before finishing. Yeah, luckily, he only nicked me with the box cutter that he had. I barely felt it, just cold for a second. Thankfully, somebody called the cops, so I only had to fend him off for about a minute. Perks of working in a neighborhood called Methpire, huh? I winced at the image of somebody coming at me with a blade, and then I let out a silent thanks that somebody had been watching out for my friend that day. I raised my hand as I turned away. Hey, you'll have to tell me more about it the next time that we hang out. Anyways, I'm going home. Night. Have a good one. I heard him call after me as I walked out into the night. A few hours later, and I found myself sprawled out onto the couch, slightly tipsy from the now mostly empty bottle of margarita sitting on the kitchen counter. On TV, an old movie from the 60s was playing, though I was only half paying attention. My hand, almost on its own accord, drifted over to the end table next to me, and I found myself picking up my phone. The screen flickered to life and I saw a new notification had shown up. More than slightly loaded, I let out a drawn-out groan. Oh, great. I slurred, tapping on it. Just as I was beginning to feel like things were getting back to normal. Now what? The Facebook opened, and I saw a post had been made to my wall by Brad. My exasperation grew and I tapped the notification. The page had taken a moment longer than normal to load. Finally, it popped up and I let out a gasp of exasperated laughter. I was staring at a wall of text in all caps, pulling myself to a sitting position and feeling the room spin slightly. I ran a face over my hand, and then I grabbed the remote and muted the TV as I squinted to focus on the words. Warning, hacker alert. To any of Dalton's friends, Eva and I need to warn you of a hacker that has taken over his account. The two of us have both received messages claiming to be him, with Eva getting a voice note that was mimicking his voice. This is very cruel play, and I don't wish to cause anybody any pain, but we needed to warn you. And this hacker clearly has access to deepfake technology that allows him to simulate his voice and create pictures of him, as the new profile picture shows. Under no circumstances should you interact with him if he attempts to contact you. Whether it is a message or a voice note, or even a video call, do not reply to him. Ignore it. We are currently working with his family and Facebook to get his account memorialized and boot him out of it. I'm sorry, but it needed to be warned. Thank you and rest in peace, Dalton. The amount of exasperation and disbelief that spiked as I read and reread the post, seeing the emoji reactions with angry and sad faces at the bottom, was quickly joined by a new emotion.
Oh, it's you again.
Anger. I stumbled to my feet, moving to the kitchen as I began to breathe heavily, the alcohol allowing me to literally begin seeing red. You gotta be kidding me, I hissed, clenching the side of the stove. This has gone too far. I don't know what's going on, but they are not bringing my family into this crap.
Let's go.
I slammed down on the metal stove with a fist, not caring if it was past 10, and I would likely get a complaint from my neighbors. I raised my phone and tapped quickly on the contact app, scrolling down until I had reached the M section. Like how they're going to subject my poor mother to this.
Let's go.
A moment later, I heard the sound of the line ringing, and I brought the phone to my ear. I knew that I was likely going to wake her up, but I would rather deal with an irritated mother than the alternative. After a few rings, the line picked up. Hello? For a moment I froze. Mom hadn't sounded like she had just woken up. She sounded as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Worry instantly flooded me, but I kept it at bay just for now. As soon as I explained what was happening, I would ask her what was wrong. For now, though, I tried to keep the slur out of my voice as much as I could. Hey, Mom, it's me. Look, I hate to call you so late, but I needed to let you know something. Just give me a moment to explain before you say anything. I don't know what the heck is going on, but something really messed up is happening online. People on there are either playing some really screwed up game or have completely lost their minds. I've been getting people saying things that I would rather not repeat. And I'll go into more detail when it's not almost 11 at night. And I'm not a little drunk, but if any of them get a hold of you, please just ignore whatever they say to you, alright? I just don't need them upsetting you. Finished, I allowed myself to stay quiet, to give her a moment to process what I would say. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch longer than I thought it would. If it weren't for the fact that I could faintly hear the sound of her TV in the background, I would have almost thought that the line had disconnected. Who is this? I froze at the question, one which had been spoken in barely a whisper. My brain short-circuited and I lost my capacity to speak for a few seconds as confusion swept over me like a tsunami. What? I managed out. The question came again. Who is this? This time I answered immediately. Mom, it's me. It's Dalton. The sound that came from the other end of the line after another long stretch of silence seemed to tear me from my intoxication. The sound of my mother letting out what I can only describe as a heart-wrenching sob, one that I had never heard her utter in my life. When she spoke again, I could tell that she was barely able to speak through tears. Whoever this is cruel. This is cruel. I felt as though the room were beginning to spin. This time it was for a completely different reason than alcohol. I felt like I had finally snapped, like I was completely losing my mind. My mother, my own mother, was almost in tears at the sound of my voice. And to hear her call me cruel felt like somebody had stabbed me in the heart. When I began to speak next, my voice made me feel as though my heart hadn't just been stabbed. It felt as if it had been ripped out. You're not my son. My mouth dropped open, and I pulled the phone back to stare at it for a moment before bringing it back to my ear. It took a few times to muster my will to speak. "What are you saying?" I managed out in barely a whisper. I felt terrified of what she'd say to me. Terrified that she wouldn't say anything and hang up. I couldn't understand. What had I done to make everybody act like this towards me? She did answer. "You're not my son, whoever you are," she said, her voice still breaking, but with the same firmness that I remembered hearing whenever I had done something wrong and got sent to my room. I began to open my mouth again, but I never had time to say anything. She spoke again, and what she said, it made me feel as if the bottom had just dropped out of the world. "You're not my son. My son died 4 months ago." It was as if every thought that I had, every emotion was wiped out in a single second. The world stopped spinning, as did the feeling of losing my mind. But what took its place made me wish that I could have the insane feeling back. Dread is soul-crushing dread. I pulled the phone away from my ear to stare at it. But faintly on the other end of the line, I heard Mom break into another sob before speaking again. "Don't call this number again." A moment later, the line clicked off. The phone slipped from my hand and it fell to the floor. I barely even noticed it. Nor did I notice the loud crash as my hand swept the bottle of margarita off the counter, shattering and spilling the remaining red liquid across the imitation tile. I was beginning to shake, first gently and then violently. My breathing quickened, until it felt like I was hyperventilating and about to pass out at any second. I looked around at the walls as I stumbled back into the living room, my mind racing. What the hell? What the hell? What is going on? This isn't happening. This is not happening. I'm not dead. I'm not dead. I would know if I died. I pinched myself earlier and it hurt. I hit the edge of the couch with my legs, my knees buckling as I slid to the floor against it. I forced myself to speak aloud, in some vain attempt to regain my composure. No, I'm alive. I know that I'm alive. I get up, I go to work, I get paid. I've gone to work the last 4 months, not just hung around the apartment. Yeah, I know I'm a bit of a shut-in, but wait, other people saw me. Conrad in the store. Yeah, he saw me. The other customers saw me too. My neighbor and Mr. Dieter waved at me. Travis even spoke too. It felt as though somebody had thrown an ice-cold bucket of water at my face. My arms dropped to my sides as a thought wormed forward into my mind. A singular thought that made the room feel as though it were beginning to spin again. Wait, Travis? No, that can't be right. I couldn't have talked to Travis because, well, Travis. I began to shake again as I tried to force away the end of that thought. But try as hard as I might, I couldn't keep myself from whispering it aloud. Travis died of a heart attack last year. Along with that, it came another thought. Another crystal clear one that made me pull my legs tight up against me, trying to stop myself from shaking. And Mr. Dieter, he died 5 years ago. Yet another horrifying dot connected in my mind. I hadn't seen Conrad in 4 months, and only just tonight came across him, after he had told me about his near miss with the robber. The world contracted in my vision, and I forced my voice out. My voice shaking as hard as I was. I'm not dead. Right?
Vio!
I grew up on a movable street. This requires explanation. In simplest terms, it meant that from my birth until my eventual escape, although I spent every day of my life on the same street, the street itself traveled. To where and how often I...
A long time ago, somebody asked me a strange question. It was my last year of high school, and I was drunk out of my mind and crashing at a friend's place. We were coming down from an after party, and half of us didn't want to go home. Two guys were sleeping on the floor. One was nodding on and off, and a lazy boy in the corner, still gripping a 40. I was on the couch with a curly-haired girl, talking about nothing. You know how to spot a kind of thing. What kind of thing? No, she said, lazily shaking her head. Not a kind of thing. A kind of thing. You're not making any sense. She poked me in the chest and put her head on my shoulder, falling half asleep as she explained. Oh, it's a game. It teaches you to think about stuff. Alright, what is it? You sure you want to know? I mean, now I have to. I was barely paying attention. My hands smelled like cheese snacks and rubber, and we had been playing ping pong and the rackets were kind of cheap. Think of a place you spend a lot of time in, like several times a week, but not all the time. Not like your bedroom. I don't spend all my time in my bedroom. Come on, you got a place in mind. I thought about this alleyway between my family home and my neighbor. It was this fenced-off alley not big enough to drive a car through. I went there every day on my way to class. Tight, I nodded. I got one. Now think of something in that place. Something you know but don't own. Something you've seen but got no pictures of. Give me a sec. I thought of this one particular thing. It was a little teddy bear keychain that somebody had put on one of the fence posts. Nothing big, just a plastic thing with a heart in the middle of the chest and an all-too-neutral teddy bear smile. Just a fun little quirk on an otherwise depressing stretch of concrete. Alright, I got a thing. Do you know what colors it is? She asked. I had an idea, but I wasn't 100% certain. There was some red in there, I knew that much. A bit yellow, but I couldn't say exactly what was what. Maybe the nose was black. Kinda, I said. She looked up at me and poked me in the chest again. That's a kind of thing, she muttered. They're pretty cool. She sat up and stretched a little, kicking over an empty can. The guy with the 40 had fully admitted defeat and curled up into a ball. They exist on the edge of things, she explained. It could be blue, it could be yellow, it could change into red. There's no way to really know. It only exists in your memory. But it is red. How can you know for sure? Like for sure, for sure. Well, I can check it. What if it wasn't red yesterday? Do you know for sure what it was yesterday? I mean, things don't change color. All kind of things do. You're making this sound like a ghost story. Who says it isn't? We got into this weird wine-fueled philosophy nonsense that led us nowhere, and ended up making out on the patio, staying up until dawn. As the sun rose and the car came to take her away, I decided to drag myself home. As I wandered, I took the route through that alley, and like always, the teddy bear keychain hung on one of the posts. Except the thing wasn't red or yellow. It was blue, like my mother's novelty sunflowers. There were a couple of red spots along the paws, but the main thing was all blue. I had been certain it was supposed to be all red. Maybe I had just focused on the detail. I picked it up and put it in my pocket and instantly forgot of kind of things. I saw that keychain a couple of times over the next few years. When I moved into my college dorm, I had it resting on my windowsill. I think my mom put it there. At some point, I knocked it over and it rolled under a nightstand, where I didn't find it until years later when I graduated. From there, it ended up in a box of knickknacks, which ended up on a shelf in my apartment. It wasn't an exciting journey, but it was my journey. You sort of forget how long things stick around until you're old enough to look back. I got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and got working on a doctorate. As part of my doctorate, I had to teach a class. My expertise circled around information science, with a slight leaning towards digital architecture and preservation. But I wanted to give my classes something to make them really stick. That was the first time in years that I thought of kind of things. Problem was, once I went looking for that teddy bear keychain to bring to class, I couldn't find it. When I held my first class, I told them all about the kind of things. I asked my students to consider what their own kind of things would be. It was all framed in context of how important it is to preserve factual information in a way that makes it contextually aware. But for all the first-year students, it turned into a thing to share at parties. And the circle of drunk philosophers continued for another generation. It was fun though, they all had something. A cracked coffee cup, an old bike wheel abandoned near the football field, a baseball cap on the top shelf that they couldn't reach. All little things that didn't matter but were important enough to be made and forgotten about. And now I had a whole class thinking about them. Every class that I taught heard that story. I skipped the part where I made out and smelled of Fritos. They didn't need the details. Not everybody knew my name, but they all remembered me asking that first question on the first day of class. You know how to spot a kind of thing. By the time that I turned 27, I had finished my doctorate. I had a paid position, but I was looking for something more permanent. You don't go chasing tenure right away, and I wanted to do more experimental work. Maybe field work even. I had applied for a couple positions at colleges out of state. Not Ivy League, but up there in the charts. I figured that this was as good a time as any to stretch my wings after spending all my time in one state and city. One of my proposals got picked up, and my time as a teacher of that one class was swiftly coming to an end. One more semester and that would be it.
Onward!
It was bittersweet. I had gotten to know my colleagues pretty well. They were a fun bunch of nerds having board game nights in the lounge. They all had this thing where they used cleaned out vodka bottles as water bottles, just so students could take funny pictures and go, "Oh, this is my professor." I was sad to see it come to an end, but it was time to move on to newer things. New can't always be bad, and my colleagues had planned one hell of a going-away party. It was the last day of class, a Friday. They were holding a bit of an event for my last class, and all my colleagues were there. Some held speeches, and the students were invited to share some anecdotes as well. There were a lot of nice words. I won't lie, I got a bit teary-eyed. Once things come to an end, everything gets put into the perspective of how much you're going to miss it. Every stupid little detail. As a final hurrah, they revealed a gift to me. Something for me to bring to my next office. I could tell it was a box of some kind, covered in a big white cloth. They pulled it off with a magician's flair, and we all applauded. There was a box, that much was right, a big one. At first, it looked like a junk drawer, a rock with googly eyes, an old horseshoe, a tasteless bronze leprechaun, and things like that. But once I saw the text printed on the side, it all made sense. Kind of things. We decided to get them for you, a colleague said, leaning on my arm. We know how much you love them, so we all went out and got our kind of things. We figured you would enjoy them. I've never been so proud to get a box of junk. The next few weeks were a blur. Moving trucks, cleaning, leases, putting those plastic buttons on the legs of new furniture so that they don't scrape the floor. Putting up shelves, straightening photos and painting. Washing the cloth for the kitchen table. Making a space into a home, one tacky bachelor item at a time. All the while, I had a box resting on top of my closet, still proudly labeled, kind of things. I got an apartment with 3 rooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen. I hadn't planned on living that large, but it was too cheap for me to pass up. I made one room into my bedroom and the other my living room, but I wasn't so sure about the third one. I decided that I would make it into a guest room somewhere down the line, but for now it was a storage space. Somewhere for me to put boxes of memories that didn't quite matter. Not just the kind of things, but the baseball cards, the participation trophies, and the signed band shirts. It was all in there. I think most people have a space like that in one way or another. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. I was settling into a new job with new people in a new town. I was learning what places made the best tofu dishes, and there was no time to reminisce. I had to look forward. If you don't, things in the rear view look bigger than they really are. On my first day of class, I brought the box of kinda things. I barely looked at it. I was too busy trying to keep the notes in my head organized. I couldn't half-ass my first day on the job. I had to make an impression. Not just for my students, but there'd be a couple of new colleagues in the crowd. That's why I brought the box.
Let's go.
Crowds love props. I shook hands with those who attended, introduced myself, and got a moderate crowd of about 40 people for my first day. Not just in class, but a couple of extras. I asked them all to sit up front as I unveiled the box. I had it turned outward toward the students. I barely saw the thing myself. No photos, I emphasized, shushing them with a finger like I was telling a secret. No pictures and no ownership. You can keep them, but they're never really yours. That got a couple of chuckles. I had a presentation ready and had them name a couple of kinda things in their own lives as I slowly pivoted into a metaphor related to my field of study. It was pretty clean. I had used that particular setup a couple of times before. And yeah, there was something about that one class that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't just being nervous about a new job. It was something about the crowd. Every time I looked back, my eyes got stuck on something. Like how you react to sudden movement, but with nothing changing. Something was putting me on edge, and I couldn't put my finger at what it was. Coming back home after a long day, I put down my box of kinda things in the hallway and I got myself a cold beer. I wasn't going anywhere and I had spent all my social energy in one go. There had been muffins in the lounge and everybody wanted to talk to me about my various articles. And of course, the kinda things. Everybody always wants to tell me about their kinda thing. I walked into my budding guest room with its big green walls. I put down my beer and tossed the box back up in the closet. As I did, something tumbled out. A rattle. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded. It couldn't have been in the box. I would have seen it. Or maybe I put it there during the move and forgot about it. Strange, I hadn't seen it for a long time. I picked it up and rolled it between my fingers, looking at the colors and shapes. It wasn't like how I remembered it. It wasn't all blue like I thought it was. It was mostly gray with details of blue and red. The eyes looked like lemons. The heart in the center of its chest was a little smaller than I had remembered. I decided to take the box back down to check if there was anything else that I had accidentally put in there that I had forgotten about. I sat down on the floor, took another sip of beer, and opened the box. For a moment, my mind short-circuited. I had never seen any of those things before. It was an old-timey alarm clock with a broken spring, a watermelon paperweight, and a handheld dinner bell without the ringer thing in the middle. I hadn't seen any of those items before, and I was more than certain that I had gone through that box at least once or twice. But then, why couldn't I remember those things? And who gave them to me? I sat there trying to think of the names of the students who had been there. I remembered them fairly well, but I couldn't point to who gave me what. And that and little details about them invaded. Was it Josh or Joshua? Did one of them have an NHL or an NBA cap? I could sort of remember the outline, but not the absolute details. It gave me a moment to pause. I considered that there might be such a thing as kind of people. Those people you spend a little time with every now and then, but never really get to know. Peripheral people, pseudo people. If that's the case, who's to say that I wasn't someone's kind of people? I mean, I had to be right. I shook the thought out of my mind, finished my beer, and got up off the floor. I headed for the door, closed my hand around the handle, and pulled. Nothing happened. Had it always been opened outward? Of course it had. It was just a new apartment, and I was getting accustomed to it. And yet, I'm not one for being paranoid. Through all my years of talking about kinda things, I always considered them a fun thought experiment. Some talked about them like demons or ghost stories, like they were supposed to bring something horrible. I never saw it like that. They were just this idea to consider about the nature of permanence, and they weren't malicious things. And yet I started to get this uncomfortable sensation in my stomach whenever I passed by my guest room. It wasn't a conscious thought, just this sense of unease. Like there would be something new for me to misremember if I entered that room with that box and didn't pay attention. I tried to remember exactly what I had seen in that box and what color they were, but without going in there to check, there was no way to know for sure. And that just made it worse. I finally decided that I was going to indulge my superstition just to demystify the whole thing. One weekend I got my phone and notepad and decided that I was going to write down and photograph everything in that box. After that, I would never have to think about it again. It could even be a fun thing to try against my students. Maybe I could ask them to remember as many things as possible from the box, and cross-check it at the end of the semester to see how many points they score. I had brought a small coffee table and a chair from the kitchen. I pulled the curtains open, letting in some moonlight. It was late May and the nights were already growing shorter, perfect for someone who would run out of steam grading assignments all Friday. I took down the box from the top of the closet and I noticed the teddy bear keychain. Nothing strange about it, other than it being in the box. I must have put it there when I put the box back up. No point in getting antsy now. And then again, the eyes looked more mango than lemon. How could I have been so certain about the lemon color? Maybe the moonlight made the difference. I brought out one item after another, only stopping briefly to think about who gave it to me. I remembered quite a lot of them. I could pretty clearly tell which they were from my colleagues, and which weren't. A couple of items were probably just random debris that one picked up to be in on the joke. However, I suspected that quite a few things were probably authentic kindas. I never went through the items one by one, taking pictures and writing down their features in a notebook. It was a strange feeling sitting alone with so many uncertainties. About 3 dozen thought experiments all lined up and cataloged. The final item that I wrote down was a little ceramic frog in a tux, smoking a cigar. There were some folks outside making a ruckus, so I got up to close the guest room door. I paused for a moment to consider which way the door went. It opened outward. Sitting back down, I took a closer look at the ceramic frog knick-knack. It wasn't smoking a cigar, it was more like a cigar. A long and lean one. It wasn't a big detail, but it was enough to make me doubt myself. What if I had cataloged as something wrong? Just a teeny tiny bit wrong. That would put the whole thing into question. I had to be certain. I went back along the line of items, double-checking. I made a few corrections. The alarm clock was stuck on 1:30, not 1:25. The broken spring went around 6 times with a twirl at the end, and not 7 times with a straight end. And finally, I was back to my teddy bear keychain. I wrote down the details as I remembered them. Scratching my head, I got up. I needed a break anyway. I went back to the guest room door and I tugged on the handle. It was supposed to open outward, but it didn't. I pulled it inward instead. That didn't work either. I took a step back, feeling a stone sink into my chest. I could hear my own breathing as the room felt smaller. I put my hand on the handle again and took a deep breath. I had opened this door before, and I knew that it would open again. I turned the handle and pushed, and it swung outward. I breathed a sigh of relief. And then again, why was I relieved? I mean, what was I expecting? There was no world in which that door wouldn't open, so what was the big deal? I decided that I wouldn't let myself be tricked by uncertainty. I closed the door and I opened it again, and then I did it again. And then I did it a third time, but with a little celebratory twirl. As I came around, I noticed something on the coffee table. The frog was definitely smoking a cigar. I stopped mid-twirl and I looked a little closer. That wasn't right. I had written cigar, crossed it out, written cigarette, and now it was certainly a cigar again. I picked it up and held it to the light. In every conceivable angle. I tried to get a reference point, like how the cigar was as thick as its froggy fingers. A cigarette wouldn't be like that. That was something I could rely on. A measurement and not a casual observation. I put it down and stepped back, looking at the table as a whole. Without perceiving every single item individually, there were things that I didn't recognize. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but I knew something looked different. Or maybe not even looked. It felt different. For the first time, I considered that maybe kind of things weren't just a thought experiment. Maybe there really was something to them. Maybe the items at the fringe of our lives do possess some quality that we don't perceive until we sit down and look. And if that was the case, what might happen if you put 36 of them in a single room and closed the door? Hold on, I didn't close the door. It was open the last time I checked. I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. I was spiraling for no reason, working myself up over nothing. Like staring at a still picture, thinking that there's a ghost in it. These weren't ghosts or creepy crawlies. They were just little things left by the roadside, figuratively and literally. I picked up the first thing that I spotted and I held it up, a little glass snail. It had lost one of its eye stalks. I looked at my reference sheet to confirm which eye that it was, only to realize the snail wasn't on the sheet to begin with. Had I missed it? At that point, I stopped. I flicked the snail across the room and grabbed my head and said, "No," out loud. I needed to hear the word to ground myself. I was making things up, I had to be. I decided to call it a night, leaving it all on the table for now. I shook my head and turned to the window, grasping for the curtains as I checked my phone. It was getting close to 11 p.m. There were no curtains. Looking up, I realized that I was standing at the wrong end of the room. The window was to the right, and there were no curtains. I had been so certain just a second ago, but my hand just tapped against the eggshell wallpaper. I was getting confused. Turning back around, I noticed two things. One, that the door was slightly more to the right than I thought it would be, and that the coffee table was up against the leftmost wall. It's like I had turned the wrong way. My eyes briefly crossed over and I saw double. I shook my head again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I tried telling myself that it was conditioning. I had been thinking about uncertainty all day, and I was tricking myself into a pattern of thought. I headed for the door, turned the handle, and pushed outward. Again, nothing. This didn't make sense. I knew that it opened outward, and I refused to believe otherwise. Something was wrong, something was very wrong, and I had to accept that this was not normal. Over the next few minutes, it felt like everything changed every time I looked away. The window got smaller, the door had the handle on the wrong side, the coffee table was up against the leftmost wall and on the right. The wallpaper was eggshell and then got a slight hint of maroon. The floor was imitation wood, and then a textureless brown plastic. I pulled on the door a couple of times, but it didn't open either way. I turned to open the window, but it was gone. I could feel a cold sweat coming on. I wasn't imagining this. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I knew what was out there, and I knew that I had looked out that window dozens of times. I backed away and put my hand on the light switch. I flicked it off and on again. A couple of things changed. A few items seemed to have moved. One of the closet doors was open. I flicked the light again faster this time. The table was slightly angled. The window was still gone. I reached for the light switch again, but it was higher up than before. I flicked it off and then back on again. But the light did not come back on. I fumbled around in the dark. I could feel myself stepping on things that weren't supposed to be there. I stubbed my toe against the coffee table in the middle of the room. I fumbled with my hands along all four walls of the room, but I couldn't find the door. I couldn't find the closet. After a while, I couldn't even find the coffee table. I tried lying down flat and spreading out my arms, hoping to touch pretty much whatever. After a couple of tries, I couldn't even find my way back to the wall. It was just me and this impressionless void. It didn't make sense to me. I knew exactly where things were supposed to be. I knew what I was supposed to be looking at, but that didn't matter. I brought up my phone and turned on the flashlight. I didn't have a lot of battery, but it would have to do. I could see my own hands, but nothing else. It was just this intense darkness where not even moonlight could reach. I got down on my knees and I touched the floor. This textureless, neutral floor. Not cold or warm, just a solid and matte black. The light didn't reflect off of it. I walked around. At times, I would bump into a wall, but when I turned, the way forward was wide open. I tried jumping a couple of times, but my feet didn't make a sound. I tried calling out, but there was no echo, and not even reverb. It was such a strange sensation that it hurt to comprehend. I ran and crawled and jumped and rolled. There was just nothing. Nothing. And when I screamed, I couldn't hear it outside my head. It felt like it was inside a cube. Not a room, but like a big, dark cube. It's as if the kind of things had made everything so uncertain that I slipped between the cracks, ending up in some place in between. If I tripped or fell, I could feel myself rolling off the floor and landing on what was previously a wall, making me think every angle was made to be uncertain, designed to change. After a while, I just started walking forward. I walked and walked and walked, but never hit a wall. 10 minutes, still no wall. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and I could taste salt on my tongue. Without anything outside yourself, you start to notice details that you would otherwise ignore. Like how you breathe or how your heart sounds as it beats. You can hear the tendons stretching your legs with every step, and you start to question why. I tried to fixate on things that I knew for certain. My name, my parents, the name of my childhood friends. But even in that circle of grounding, there was doubt. What color were my mother's eyes, really? And that damn teddy bear keychain. What did it really look like? That seemed to shift something. There was a flash, like a light post going past a speeding car. And that was something. Reaction. Maybe the kind of things. If they got me lost, could they also help me find a way back? I thought about that teddy bear keychain. I tried to imagine myself in that first drunken morning, picking it up from the fence behind my family home. I remembered turning it over in my hands, looking at the colors and the patterns. But in that thought, there was nothing there. Just this swirling pattern of black and white. The static between TV channels. Thinking about it tickled my hands. making my brain feel like it needed to discard the memory like an unpleasant sneeze. I brought the memory back farther. I thought about that night on the couch with that curly-haired girl. That night when I had first heard about the kind of things. Who had she been? We had talked all night, we made out, but I couldn't remember her name. Did I ever see her again? And there were a couple of things that didn't add up. Had she known anybody at that party? Why was she the only girl there? Why didn't I get her number? My thoughts spiraled as I started to question every step along my path. You are what you do, and if all you've done can be called into question, you start to feel like nothing. I fell to my knees. It didn't hurt, and nothing hurt. It was like floating in a world that forgot to pull you down. I would sometimes find myself inches above the ground, having to stretch my toes down just to feel something solid. After a while, I lost that too. But I kept my mind on that teddy bear. I pushed past the fractal images that I had built in my mind. The red, the blue, the gray, the black. The lime and mango eyes. If you looked past all of it, there were certainties that never changed. It had 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart on its chest. That was always there, and that was certain. I repeated it like a mantra. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. Something was happening. The ground came back, and there was a light. Were they distant lamps, pieces of wallpaper, or lonely stars? It was a night sky. I recognized some of the constellations. I spun around, pointing out patterns that I recognized. I spun on my heel, excited to feel something solid beneath me. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. As I came around the second spin, my entire field of view was absorbed. Something astronomically large, impossibly large. A planet-sized eye so unfathomable that it couldn't be considered a thing or a place. It just was. An eye. The word rattled in my mind like a panicked bird in a cage, screaming at me over and over. An eye. It was an eye. It repeated to the point where it turned from thing to word to noise. An eye, an eye, an eye, an eye, an eye. I shut my eyes and imagined the teddy bear key ring in my hands. I imagined the texture. I decided I would have to commit to a truth that I knew to be true. I had to force myself to be certain. I decided it was blue with red details. That's how I remembered it from that first night. And that's what it had to be. Blue with red details and lemon eyes. Looking up, I could see dozens of coffee tables in random patterns, all covered in teddy bear keychains of various shapes and patterns and colors. All the while, something so large that the universe itself looked like the dark of its eye bore down on me from every angle. It didn't need to say anything. I knew what had to be done. It wanted a choice, a certainty. I had to show it the right kind of thing. I have no idea how long I wandered that void, poking and prodding at those little keychains. One was darker blue with yellow lining, one was almost green. Every color combination imaginable in every angle. The eye was patient, I had to be right. I don't know how long it took me, but I found myself holding something. I held it up and I looked at it. I knew that it was the right one before I even noticed the colors. Maybe it became the right one just by believing it to be. And that's when it hit me. It didn't matter. The original color was gone. There was no point in trying to restore an idea or thought that had passed from memory. I decided then and there that I would make this something it had never been. I rolled the keychain between my fingers and I opened my eyes. My hand was on the wall as the lights flicked back on. I was covered in sweat. All the items from the Kinda Things box were still neatly lined up on the coffee table. Even the frog with the cigarette. The mint green walls were there. The window, the curtains, the closet. And when my shaking hand touched the door handle, it effortlessly swung outward. I cried with relief and crawled out, ending up in the hallway, clutching my teddy bear keychain. The next day, that whole box of items went straight into the trash. I stopped talking about the kind of things in my lectures. I made up this other thing about humpback whales and their patterns, but it wasn't nearly as effective. People like talking about their own kind of things, and their own ideas relating to it. I still hear people talking about it on campus to this day, despite not mentioning it for about 3 years. I have photographed and documented everything about that teddy bear 100 times over, and it hasn't changed since. I know it better than the color of my mother's eyes. It was my one anchor binding me to this place. I could never go without it. I still get uncertain sometimes. I think when you cluster so many kind of things, it triggers a kind of chain reaction. If you just have the one, I don't think they do that much. You might just make the occasional mistake when trying to remember them. I think what I went through was a result of a cluster impression over a prolonged period of time. I don't ask people that strange question anymore. I don't want to invite them into something that they can't prepare for. But if you were to look for a kind of thing on your own, and do so in a way that destroys it, photograph it, keep it close, remember it. If you keep it in the periphery, it may just drag you out there with it. I've heard so many ideas on what they are, and why they function this way. Some say that it's demons touching things that we forget to care for. Others say that it's a ghostly possession. I heard one student claiming that they're lost souls, looking for solace in places that won't be disturbed. I don't know. I don't think anyone will ever know for sure. It's the nature of kind of things to never truly be known. But as long as I have that one thing to keep me grounded, I'll be fine. Maybe there will be the occasional kind of thing in my life going forward, but at least I'll know not to collect them. For now, I'll keep my keychain close and look to things that I know for certain. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. My all-red teddy bear keychain with coal black eyes.
Oh.
Love it.
Love you.